bold conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark Meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon and happy Halloween. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. Today, Rachel Reeves' Halloween budget has been called a nightmare on Downing Street as the Chancellor put the knife into pensioners, farmers, small business owners, landlords and even humble boozers. Today, the Chancellor even admitted working people's pay will be impacted by her tax hikes. Was it all trick and no treats? We'll sink our fangs into the details. And yesterday, when Rachel Reeves knocked just a penny off a pint, Nigel Farage joked, "Great, I'll save £1 per week." Well, in today's show, I'll talk to the landlady at one of my favourite boozers, the Dog and Parrot in Eastwood, on why she thinks the Chancellor's help is small beer to the hospitality sector. And farm owner Jeremy Clarkson has roared that British farmers have been shafted in the budget thanks to cruel inheritance tax changes that could harvest a state-fuelled land grab. I'll plough into the details with farmers and an NFU president. And now you may have heard, rumour has it, that Sir Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker. Well, on today's show, I'll talk to a real-life toolmaker, and he's got a son. His name is Conrad Pearson of Pearson Precision Toolmakers in Hereford. And Con reckons Labour's budget has screwed his company and may force him to sack one of his lads. That's all coming up in today's show. Welcome to the show. Hope you're having a fantastic Halloween so far. Was that budget a trick to you with no treats? A lot of people are complaining. An astonishing report came out today from the Resolution Foundation saying that real pay will only go up by £13 a week over the next 20 years. Doesn't that make you feel like leaping out of bed in the morning? 13 quid for the daily grind. Do you feel this government has completely abandoned you? It's gone back on its promises. There'll be no tax rises on working people, they said. Well, a lot of people today are saying they are counting ample tax rises. They're not happy, and it's all trick and no treats. You let me know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. But before that, it's time for your headlines with the peerless Mark White.
Good afternoon. It's 3:02. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. And we begin with breaking news on the devastating floods in Spain. The Spanish government has just confirmed the death toll has now risen to 140. Rescue efforts are continuing as authorities deal with the worst flooding in the country in decades. Dozens of people are still missing after the huge floods that swept the eastern province of Valencia and beyond. A 71-year-old British man is among those killed. Torrential rain swept through towns, dragging cars, downing bridges and leaving some people trapped in floodwaters. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has declared 3 days of national mourning as the extreme conditions continue, restricting some of those rescue efforts. Well, hundreds of soldiers have also been sent to Valencia, one of the worst hit areas, to help with the rescue and recovery operation. The Prime Minister, his Chancellor and other members of the Cabinet have spent the day defending the biggest tax hike in a generation. The budget paves the way for £40 billion a year in extra taxes. On a visit to an NHS trust in the Midlands, Sir Keir Starmer said the rise was the responsible thing to do to deal with the fiscal black hole and provide more money for public services.
We've had to do what is responsible to fix the foundations and rebuild our country. As I think is now well understood, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, money that wasn't accounted for by the last government. I'm not prepared to simply walk past that. We have to fix it. So we've done the responsible thing. The principles that we've put in place are to stabilise our economy and to invest in the future along with reform.
Well, the Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick has accused Labour of lying to the public in the run-up to the election. Mr Jenrick claims Rachel Reeves' budget will mean misery for millions and said the tax hike amounts to the complete opposite of what Labour said during the election campaign.
OBR were not willing to put their name to this idea that Rachel Reeves has said that there was a £20 billion black hole. I think that Rachel Reeves has been fundamentally dishonest. I mean, she's almost a compulsive liar. She said that taxes were not going to rise on working people before the general election. In fact, she said it 30 times. They've just risen. £40 billion of tax rises. She said there wasn't going to be any more borrowing. Borrowing has just massively increased. And then she invented this idea of a black hole.
Well, the NHS has been handed a huge £22.6 billion boost in the budget. But many health experts are warning the funding for social care falls short. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has told GB News the Chancellor made a big judgment call, going for investment rather than decline.
What the funding the Chancellor's allocated to us will enable us to do is bring an end to 14 years of Conservative decline and start rebuilding our NHS, of course, starting with the biggest issue, which is the size of the waiting list, making sure we're getting those waiting lists down, making sure we're getting people seen faster. This is a process on reform, and this will be an ongoing process every day and every year that we are in government, and I'm the Health and Social Care Secretary. We will be delivering not just on investment, but also reform.
From today, safe access zones will be introduced to create a 150-metre wide area outside abortion clinics. The protection area will be introduced outside all abortion clinics in England and Wales to ensure women seeking abortion services will be better protected from harassment or distress. The new legislation will stop anti-abortion campaigners from handing out leaflets, holding vigils and showing graphic images to women near the sites. Lawyers acting for alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed have said they've now been contacted by 400 people. Speaking at a news conference, Dean Armstrong KC said those who've contacted the Justice for Harrods Survivors group are not just from Harrods, but from Fulham FC and various other places associated with Al-Fayed. A string of allegations have been made against the former Harrods owner following the release of a documentary about the businessman who died last year. And you're right up to date with all the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Now, strap yourself in, stir that extra strong coffee. Here's Martin Daubney.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark White. Now, in the most left-wing budget for decades, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves pushed taxes to their highest level in history with her £40 billion tax bomb. And she's relaxed government borrowing rules to finance a massive spending spree. Was it a nightmare on Downing Street? Well, that's what some of the newspapers seem to be suggesting today. And let's take a look. First up is The Sun. Look at that. It's the Pumpkinhead Chancellor there. At least she kept it down at the pumpkins. Of course, that is referring to the fact that at least fuel duty didn't go up. And what we got next, we got the cartoon. That was from the Sun homepage. There she is as Count Dracula. Look, the blood dripping from her fangs as she sunk her teeth into the British taxpayer. Next, we've got a cartoon, I believe, from the Daily Telegraph. There she is with her pumpkin-shaped dispatch box and her skull and crossbones around her neck. There's a theme emerging here, isn't there? And finally, we've got a cartoon, I believe, from The Guardian. And there she is, look, hanging up the taxpayer by the straps in a torture dungeon. And even that from the supportive Guardian. Left, right and centre, it seems the Chancellor cannot get a good headline on this horrible Halloween. Now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think, and every day we'll be running our poll of the day, and today we're asking quite simply this: do you feel like a winner or a loser from yesterday's budget? Get stuck in, go and answer the question. Do you feel like a winner or a loser from that historic budget? And the final result will be announced later today in my show. Well, joining me now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. Of course, in a short while, you're going to be interviewing the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, sinking your fangs into her on Halloween. But it has to be said, Chris, there hasn't been a positive headline anywhere across the media today, from the BBC, The Guardian, The Telegraph. Everywhere seems to be very, very critical of what they're seeing as a very bruising budget yesterday. In fact, the Resolution Foundation has just come out, Chris, with the most apathetic prediction, I think, of all time, saying real pay will only raise by £13 a week over the next 2 decades. It's a bad news day on Downing Street.
Yeah, Martin, I'm not sure about sinking fangs in anywhere, but certainly we'll be grilling her on behalf of GB News viewers later, and that interview will play out, I think, after 6 p.m. tonight. Just watching on my phone there's reports now that the pound is falling. It's down 1.2% in the past 3 days, the biggest fall in the past 18 months, according to reports. That is a worry, I think, for anybody worrying about the economy. Certainly not what Rachel Reeves wanted to see as she goes out to face the world's press and trying to justify these rather large tax rises, £40 billion in the budget. She's also, I think, we'll be asking her later about how this squares with the admission today from the OBR that the real wages will fall or stall, but in 2020, 26 and 2027. Rachel Reeves herself is reported to admit that real wage increase might be slightly less than it otherwise might have been. I don't remember people voting Labour to get less money than if the Tories had stayed in post. So I think we'll be asking a question along those lines when we see her shortly. But certainly the fallout from this budget is taking shape. There aren't many good headlines. We heard there from Sir Keir Starmer, who we understand has now returned to Downing Street behind me from visiting a hospital earlier today. These are tough medicine, they are saying. We're going to take this as a £22 billion black hole, they say. But again, the OBR, the Office of Budget and Responsibility, only found £9.5 billion. Still a lot of money, but not near the £22 billion black hole we were told by Labour. Again, another question for the Chancellor. She hasn't yet spoken to GB News a full day since she announced that budget. Still time to get your questions in to GB News. I'll try and ask them of the Chancellor. gbnews.com/your say is the website to go to. Ask your question. We'll do our best to hold the Chancellor to account, because we're all paying that bill for the Chancellor's imposed on so many of us.
Now, Chris, before you go through that famous number 11 door there and interview the Chancellor, can I quickly remind you, and viewers indeed, in about 2 hours' time, the deadline closes for the Conservative Party leadership vote. Of course, members choosing now between the final two, Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick. Robert Jenrick, a short while ago, putting the boot into Rachel Reeves, calling her a compulsive liar.
That's right. Deadline of the voting is 5 p.m. online. I think the fact you have Robert Jenrick going on GB News at 1 p.m. today making those remarks, we have Kemi Badenoch elsewhere on the broadcast media, shows how close it might be. Now, everyone thought that Kemi Badenoch was the runaway winner, but I think the concern has been that there's quite a low turnout amongst members. Around 140,000 members are entitled to vote. But as of last week, I was told that as few as 40% have returned their ballot papers. That might go towards 60% by the time ballots close at 5 p.m. But still leaves a lot of votes out there. And if any intervention by people like Robert Jenrick to try and eat into that lead of Kemi Badenoch could make it closer than we expect. But we get the result around 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. It's live on GB News. I'll be there to try and get an interview with the winner. And it's quite striking that this part, the Tory party, the lead, the opposition against the government, has had no real leader. Because, you know, Rishi Sunak, while making a good fist of it in the Commons yesterday, has stepped back and allowed the two candidates to make their points and try and win support from members. So we haven't yet had really a formal leader to take the fight to the Labour Party. But right now there's a kind of lot of food for thought, I think, in yesterday's budget. As I've been saying for a while now, the trailers were until yesterday, but the movie, the narrative of this government has now started. And for many, right now, it feels like a horror movie.
Indeed, it is a nightmare on Downing Street. That's where you are. Good luck with your Halloween head-to-head with Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. That's going out on Jubes & Co from 6 p.m. tonight. Chris Hope, thank you very much. Now, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by Emily Carver, live from County Durham. Emily, welcome to the show. You've been doing sterling work for the People's Channel out there. And I believe you've got a very special guest with you, Billy Pounder, a gentleman, of course, who we discovered on Patrick Christie's show. Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. If you remember last week, Patrick stumbled upon Billy Pounder. Now, Billy Pounder is a pensioner up here in Stanley in County Durham. Now, I must say it's absolutely beautiful here. The landscapes are absolutely stunning, I must say. But it might be a glorious day today, but it's certainly going to get very chilly indeed as the winter draws in. Now, I'm going to stumble upon Billy once again. Now, Billy, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, last week you were telling Patrick about your worries about paying the heating bills, paying all the bills. They always seem to be going up, cuts to the winter fuel payment and all of that. We've had the big budget, but you've got a bit of news for us, don't you? Perhaps might be a bit of positive news.
Yeah, well, what is saying about... Sorry, don't eat the mic. But what they're saying about the pension goes up, they just take it off one and put it on somewhere else, like my council tax and that. But the Prime Minister's actually getting the pension scheme, like the works pensions, to get in touch with us yesterday. And I haven't finished with them yet. I'm waiting for a follow-up call for somebody to come and help us fill forms in to say I'm allowed a bit more with my ill health and that, you know.
Yeah, so your interview that you did with Patrick last week on GB News, number 10, the government were clearly listening and they thought, gosh, we need to actually do something about this. And now you get a call from Work and Pensions.
Yeah, I got a call yesterday and she was really nice, a woman. And she said, I said, like, I was a bit embarrassed in my house because I can't bend down and do the jobs that I'd like to do in the house. But she said she was going to send somebody out to give us a hand filling the forms in, because I'm not thick, but I'm not. Some of the forms is massive, you know what I mean? I want to know everything. Yeah. But so
this is one of the things, isn't it? Because you know, the government says we're taking away the winter fuel payment. You can sign up to pension credit, all this. We find out from pensioners themselves that it's not that easy, actually, and that people who are very smart still need a bit of help.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can get by on some things, but they don't tell you what you're allowed unless you ask. I mean, there's a lot of people that know the system that should probably start helping the other ones, but they get everything. But people like me, that's never claimed out. I haven't a clue about the claim stuff, you know, so...
And how are you feeling about this winter? Because last week, I think a lot of our viewers and listeners were quite shocked to see that you had your electric heater, and you're having to move it around. It's not a big place, is it? No. It's not a big place, is it? But to save money on those bills, you were moving around your little heater to keep warm. Now, it's been a lovely day today, but it's going to get very cold indeed, isn't it, up here?
Yeah. Oh, it gets really cold, like we're going to get the cold weather. But that little heater's been a godsend, because, like, on a night you can stick it at the bedroom door and it'll warm the bedroom up. you know, the kitchen, the gas cooker usually does the job, like, and I just move it around the sitting room and, like, where the bathroom is. Obviously, I don't take it in the bathroom, but as long as it's blowing hot air, it's a little godsend.
Yeah. And now, the Labour Party, new government, they'll want to hang on to votes from people like you. You know, they're supposed to represent working class areas like this, old coal mining community and the like. Do you think you'll stick with them?
No, I wouldn't, no. Definitely not. I don't think any of the parties will do any good. They're just all after themselves. Where she got the budget at, I don't know, all these billions and all these numbers and all that doesn't mean diddly squat to me, like. I think she must have played with a lot of monopoly sets when she was younger. You know, when you're getting, 20 billion here, 20 billion, and I think, you know, she's on about that and what they're doing with the farmers and tax and all that. It's all wrong, like. Yeah. They just don't live in the real world.
Yeah. I mean, the taxes are going up hugely on nearly everyone, it seems, and working people are going to be...
They weren't going to tax them. They weren't going to tax everything, but it's been like a big smoke screen from the beginning. If they put wages up, but it's going to hit the people.
Yeah, and Billy, just lastly, our political editor is going to be speaking to Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, in just a little bit now. Not long to go till that interview. Now, this is important to hold her to account. Is there anything that you would like to ask on behalf of yourself or on behalf of the community here?
Like I can get a penny off a pint if I had a pub near. There's only about one round here. But it's half price, because I'll come to a pub, like, in a restaurant, you know what I mean? Yeah. So they don't know the real world, man. They've got to get out and get about, like, come up here.
Yeah, so there's the question, really. Are you going to come up here and see, you know, what's happening up here in County Durham, in the northeast as well? Well, thank you very much indeed, Billy. I really appreciate it. And, of course, to Foxy as well, the gorgeous dog. Very beautiful indeed. Thank you so much for your time. Billy Pounder.
Just says, so, I don't think their map goes past Wetherby. It goes, they maybe spilled some coffee on the bit from Wetherby up to Scotland, because there's nothing happens up the northeast. It's all down the country. They call it northeast, down Manchester and stuff. That's not the northeast. It's colder up here. Yeah. And they're thinking we get nothing.
Well, Billy, we've been hearing quite a lot about of that. You know, people living up here thinking that Westminster has sort of forgotten them and there's nothing in the budget for them. But it's been a wonderful day here in Stanley in County Durham. Martin, chew over that in the studio.
Superb stuff. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Billy, and thank you, Foxy. Magnificent best of British Billy Pounder. Great stuff. Now, earlier on GB News, Health Secretary Wes Streeting defended his party's budget.
People publish manifestos, when parties publish manifestos, that they keep all of the promises in it. Now, I know that's not an expectation that's been met for some time with previous governments, but this government is delivering every single commitment in that manifesto. And we have come in, we've looked at the state of the books, we knew it would be bad, it was even worse than we expected, genuinely worse. I mean, just to give you an example from my department, I was told within weeks of entering office that rather than delivering 40,000 more appointments every week to cut waiting lists, I would have to tell the NHS to deliver 20,000 fewer appointments every week because we couldn't afford it because of the black hole. Well, the Chancellor and I didn't tolerate that. We found the money, plugged the black hole, wiped the slate clean and put the NHS in a position to start rebuilding after years of decline.
And to remind you, our very own Christopher Hope, our political editor, will be sitting down with the Chancellor Rachel Reeves later this afternoon. Now, if you've got any questions for the Chancellor on this happy Halloween, then please send them through to gbnews.com/your say. Get them to us, we'll get them to Chopper, and he can get them to the Chancellor. Now, we're crossing to Spain live next for the latest on the deadly floods there. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're
proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Serving some of the most talked about food in Chelsea, executive head chef of Number 50 Cheney, Ian Smith, has created a range of menus with a hint of the homeland, using the finest British ingredients sourced by trusted suppliers. Ian Smith was head chef at Jason Atherton's Social Eating House and spent time in the kitchens of the Galvin brothers. Ian joins me now to tell more of the story. Tell me about Number 50 Cheney.
Yes, so we are a beautiful restaurant down in a corner of Chelsea on the Embankment with an amazing team. And we are really pride ourselves on, being an affordable luxury that people, really are wanting to return to week in, week out.
What's the view from your restaurant?
Well, you can see the Embankment, the Thames, and Albert Bridge, which is very nice.
Very
it's actually lit up. Very romantic.
And tell me a little bit about your philosophy. I was talking there about having a touch of the homeland, British food, seasonal food.
Yes. Yeah, I think for me, great cooking is, with simplicity on finest ingredients, cooked with simplicity, and ultimately, there to be enjoyed through... Yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, it starts as a young person's business. You went into it very young, didn't you? 15?
Yes. Yeah, so I was 15. I sat in my parents' bedroom, called the Ritz, the Dorchester and Claridge's, and very luckily, a man on the end of the phone, 21 years ago, sent me on to a college course called the Specialised Chef Scholarship. 3 days later, I had a Ritz stamp letter through the post, and off me and my parents went, and luckily I got on the course.
And how old were you when you got your first responsibility, would you say?
I think the biggest responsibility in my career is today. Leading Number 50 Cheney.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, a 71-year-old British man is among those confirmed to have been killed in deadly flash floods that have hit large parts of Spain. In the last few minutes, Valencia regional authorities have said that the death toll has now risen to a tragic 155. Let's go live now to Valencia and speak to GB News reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, the death toll is tragically creeping up by the minute. What's the very latest there?
Well, I don't think anyone here on the ground would be particularly surprised about the tragic increase of that death toll, and I'm sure over the coming days that will continue to rise. And it's no wonder when you take a look at the scenes of devastation here behind us in this small village of Picaña on the outskirts of Valencia. You can see that bridges have been ripped down by these flash floods. You can see homes and businesses over the way from us here. One house in particular, which I think we can zoom in on. Either side, the homes seem to be still standing at the very least, but that one home in the middle there, completely ripped apart. You can still see the mirror on a wall. You can see a mattress hanging over a tree. That person's home has been completely torn to pieces by this devastating weather, the most devastating weather that Spain has seen for many decades. Now, as you say, that death toll rising to 155. The people here in Picaña, and I'm sure it'll be similar scenes across Valencia and across Spain, people are coming together to try and do what they can to support the local communities. We spoke to one gentleman earlier who was on his way to try and take food and water to his wife's parents. This is what he had to tell us about the situation here.
I have never lived something like this. It was, we went to the doctor that is on the other side of the riverboat, and apparently the river was like 1/4 of size, and we spent 20 minutes in the doctor. When we were trying to cross back, after 20 minutes it was full of water without raining. So we were saying, what is going on here? So apparently there was like, in the mountain somewhere was raining like 400 liters or at least. So all the water came, I mean, like a tsunami or something, and destroy everything.
And that is just one instance of one family among thousands, perhaps tens, hundreds of thousands of families who will be affected across this part of Spain over the coming days, weeks, months, as this rescue operation continues. Over the past few hours, we've seen members of the Civil Guard smashing windows on vehicles. They say that sadly there will likely be other bodies uncovered that way. We've also seen the Civil Guard up in the helicopter attempting both to try and rescue people who may still be stranded, trapped in their homes, but also to try and potentially recover people who've sadly lost their lives as a result of this natural disaster taking place here in Spain.
And Sophie, yesterday we just saw the most astonishing sort of sludge-coloured tsunami sweeping through that area, sweeping cars along with it, sweeping vans along with it, just turning the entire area to matchwood. It looks pretty clear behind you now that the weather has passed through, but as I understand it, is there yet more rain that yet could come in the following on from what happened yesterday?
Absolutely. Spain's weather system has warned that this could continue. Here in Valencia tomorrow, we are expecting more heavy rain. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, has warned people to remain in their homes because he says the danger may well not yet have passed. So that is the warning, that is the situation that we're facing here. You can see when we arrived this morning, the water here was down in this valley was essentially non-existent. But myself and my camera operator, Lucia, were chatting earlier. We've noticed in the past couple of hours that water has gotten significantly deeper. It's moving significantly faster than it was. And I think that could well be a warning sign of the days to come. So the message to the people of Valencia and wider Spain is to try and stay indoors and to try and stay safe.
Sophie Reber, excellent reporting there live from Valencia. Thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. Just to remind those joining us, the death toll now tragically risen to 155 in the wake of those flash floods. There's a map there. You can see the difference. Look at that, astonishing. The before and after you see on the left there, that's before that low-lying lake suddenly. Look at that, just completely merged with the coastal area. Huge ingress of water and all that area, of course, being populated. And we saw that footage of, as I said, vehicles being swept along like matchwood. Huge devastation caused. They saw the pictures there. Sophie Reber looked like the back of a house had literally been blown off. You could see inside the living quarters, beds, mirrors, clothing, people's. In fact, we've just had a quick breaking update. Now that death toll has risen further now, 158. So 3 added to that death toll in these past few moments. As Sophie Reber said there, the emergency authorities and 1,000 of the civil troops have been deployed to the area now. The retrieval of bodies is paramount. 158 now dead, rising from 155 just a few moments ago. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including have Labour betrayed farmers? Well, we'll be speaking to a farmer for his thoughts. You would not want to miss that. That's coming next. But first, is your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Good evening, good afternoon, I should say, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We begin with more on that breaking news about the devastating floods in Spain, with the Spanish government just confirming in the last few minutes that the death toll has now risen again, this time to 158 people. Rescue efforts are continuing as authorities deal with the worst flooding in the country in decades. Dozens of people are still missing after the huge floods that swept the eastern province of Valencia and beyond. A 71-year-old British man is among those killed. Well, torrential rain swept through towns, dragging cars, downing bridges and leaving some people trapped in floodwaters. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has declared 3 days of national mourning as the extreme conditions continue restricting those rescue efforts. The Prime Minister, his Chancellor and other members of the Cabinet have spent the day defending the biggest tax hike in a generation. The budget paves way for £40 billion a year in extra taxes. Well, on a visit to an NHS trust in the Midlands, Sir Keir Starmer said the rise was the responsible thing to do to deal with the fiscal black hole and to provide more money for public services.
We've had to do what is responsible to fix the foundations and rebuild our country. As I think is now well understood, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, money that wasn't accounted for by the last government. I'm not prepared to simply walk past that. We have to fix it. So we've done the responsible thing. The principles that we've put in place are to stabilise our economy and to invest in the future along with reform.
Well, the Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick has accused Labour of lying to the public in the run-up to the election. Mr Jenrick claims Rachel Reeves' budget will mean misery for millions and said the tax hike amounts to the complete opposite of what Labour said during the election campaign. From today, safe access zones will be introduced to create a 150-metre wide area outside abortion clinics. The protection areas will be introduced outside all abortion clinics in England and Wales to ensure women seeking abortion services will be better protected from harassment or distress. The new legislation will stop anti-abortion campaigners from handing out leaflets, holding vigils and showing graphic images to women near the sites. Lawyers acting for alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed have said they've now been contacted by 400 people. Speaking at a news conference, Dean Armstrong KC said those who've contacted the Justice for Harrods Survivors Group are not just from Harrods, but from Fulham FC and various other places associated with Al-Fayed. A string of allegations have been made against the former Harrods owner following the release of a documentary about the businessman who died last year. And you're right up to date with all the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We're back with Martin Daubney after the break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some areas have been lucky to see sunshine today. Many others have been cloudy and it stays that way through the rest of the day. Mild though. However, it is increasingly wet and windy in the far north. Tightly packed isobars around the top of this area of higher pressure and weather fronts sinking south. So some heavier rain for a time, especially during the evening for Shetland. That rain pushing into Orkney and northwest Scotland overnight. A lot of low cloud here. Further south, we do have some cloud breaks for northeast England, more especially southern parts of England and South Wales. Some of those cloud breaks will continue overnight. And where we do see those cloud breaks, temperatures dipping into the mid-single figures, and there'll be a few mist patches around first thing Friday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover where we keep the cloud 10 or 11 degrees first thing. But a fairly gloomy start once again, whether you've got the cloud or those mist and fog patches. Certainly some cloud covering the hills of Wales and northern England, some drizzle here. More extensive drizzle coming into Northern Ireland and western and northern Scotland first thing Friday, but clearing from the far north. The wind's easing, but at the same time changing direction to bring colder air in to Shetland, Orkney, and then the far north of the mainland of Scotland. So starting the day, chilly here compared with recent mornings. and it's going to be a colder than average day in the far north. But elsewhere we keep generally cloudy skies and mild weather. The rain fizzling out as it pushes into the central belt and the southeast of Scotland by the afternoon. And temperatures broadly 13 to 15 Celsius, except for the far north of Scotland, where it will be 6 to 8 degrees. Brighter skies, though, through Friday for the north of Scotland as this feature moves south across central and southeastern parts. That tends to fizzle out into the weekend as higher pressure builds once again. However, that does mean that many areas will remain largely cloudy.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go firstly to Lancashire. There's some queues forming northbound on the M6 around Lancaster, 33 to junction 34. A lane closure in place to assist a collision there being dealt with. There's a broken down vehicle causing queues on the northbound M1 from Worksop at 30 up to Sheffield at 31, so that's queuing as well. A lane closure in place. The Heatherset bypass in Norfolk, the northbound A11 from the Wyndham turnoff through towards Station Lane in Heatherset. Now that is closed, queuing back to the Berwick interchange. An earlier overturned tanker and fuel spillage being dealt with and recovered. And the Dartford Tunnel anti-clock M25, the left-hand tunnel's closed, queuing back to Swanley at 3. There's been a bump there. The one westbound on the M4 away from Hungerford 14's cleared, although it's still slow. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, family farms will be hit with whopping inheritance tax rises after the Chancellor unveiled plans to scale back agricultural relief on land valued at more than £1 million. The National Farmers Union say these changes could be the final straw for many farmers. And joining me now is the dairy, beef and arable farmer Charles Goadby from Warwickshire. Charles, welcome to the show. Jeremy Clarkson spoke out earlier yesterday saying he believes farmers have been shafted. What's your take on yesterday's budget?
I think Jeremy's absolutely right. We didn't see this coming, and this could be a death knell for farming, but also for our food security in this country. I don't think the government have quite realised how much damage they have done.
And you're surrounded by some of your animals in the background there. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, is about to go into 11 Downing Street and speak with the Chancellor. You've got a major beef with her, it's fair to say. If you're going to put a question to her today, Charles, what would you like to ask the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves?
I'd like to know when this whole plan came together. I spoke to my local MP only last week, and she claimed that she wasn't involved with it. It was all done before the election. And then to find out during, what's been said, that it was only because of the £22 billion black hole that they allegedly found that they've had to make these plans. So somebody's not been telling the truth, have they? These plans have obviously come about since the election.
And Charles, what a lot of people don't understand, of course, is that a lot of farmers are asset rich. The land has a good value, of course, but it's incredibly hard to be cash rich in the current climate, in the current environment. You're working all the hours God sends for ever decreasing margins. Do you think politicians in Westminster have got the slightest inkling, the slightest clue of how tough it is to make money out of farming these days in Britain?
They haven't got a clue. I mean, we came to this farm in 1964, my father did, and I've worked along with my brothers, 70, 80 hours a week, often for probably less than half of the minimum wage or the equivalent to the minimum wage, because we knew we were investing in the future. We were investing in our future, but also the future of the industry. And we were willing and prepared to do that. And now to find out that that's just been taken away from us, it's just gut-wrenching.
And Charles, the farms in question, is about 27% of British farms will have a land value upon death of more than £1 million. And so they will be swept into this new inheritance bracket. Do you fear that that's going to break up generations of farms, generations of farming heritage? And what happens next? Some people are saying that there's some kind of plan going on here for the land to be sold off cheap to the government so they can build wind farms, solar farms, housing estates. Do you think there's a deeper, more malicious war against farmers going on here, Charles?
There's certainly no consideration for farming and food production. Let's get that clear straight away. What the plan is, I don't think anybody in government has a plan. They haven't got a clue. I think the issue that we're going to see is that, yes, they've said, is it 27% aren't going to be affected? But actually, 27% of farms, but what percentage of the food comes from those 27% of farms? I mean, a lot of the farms that are below the £1 million threshold, they've said they've put that in place to protect family farms. Well, that's not protecting farms, that's protecting small holdings. If we take the average cost of land in this area, it's going to be around about 65 acres, £1 million will buy you. And that is not going to be a viable business, a viable farm. Now, the average farm here in the UK is 220 acres. So going on those sort of land prices, if I was in that situation, I would have to pay £450,000 tax on just the land alone. Now, how do I afford that? Do I sell up part of my land, or do I look at taking out a mortgage and spreading that over, say, 25 years? And if I was to do that, and let's use, interest rates at around about 7.5%, which I think are probably, they could well be more than that. I can see inflation going up on the back of this budget. If we said 7.5%, that's going to be £40,000 a year I'm going to have to find to service that debt. That's £184 an acre. That's my profit gone. That's not allowing me to reinvest. That's not allowing me to, keep a sustainable business. Not for now, for my future, but also for my family's future. I have 2 young children who are mad keen and passionate on farming, and that future has been taken away from them. Then we also have to look at, if this land's suddenly going to come on the market, what's that going to do to land prices? There is a lot of fear that we could see land prices fall, and how many existing businesses that aren't going to be affected by the inheritance tax relief are actually going to find themselves then, because of the decrease in value, in negative equity. So it's not just those farmers that are having to deal with inheritance tax that are going to be affected. It's also going to have a knock-on further afield. And then the final thing is, if there's that many farmers are going to have to plan for this, either be it saving for the inheritance tax or having to pay financially for, the mortgages, how much is that going to take out of local rural economies? I mean, that's money that's going to be going into banks, and multinationals. That is not going to be going into the food dealers, the manufacturers, the machinery repair people that we use all on our doorstep. So it's going to have a huge impact on the whole rural economy.
And Charles, it just really makes me think, have they got any clue about, there's no farms, there's no food. And then what? We have to import everything. We're going to destroy British agricultural businesses, force those jobs abroad, be more reliant on imports, be more reliant on the fuel, the net zero, the cost of that. It's an astonishing lack of foresight. It really simply beggars belief. Charles Godby, thank you very much for joining us on GB News, and the very, very best of British with your business, and let's stay in touch. Thank you for your input today. Thank you. Now, it's been a spooky day because, of course, it's Halloween, and we'll be crossing over to our favourite ghoul, Doogie Beattie, next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
National Trust Director General has said something rather curious. She's admitted that 70% of the charity's staff are Union Jack-hating progressive activists. Yes, this was speaking at a Labour Party fringe event. The boss of the charity, Hilary McGrady, acknowledged that there was a gap between her staff's views and the views held by the wider public. So was she being honest? Joining me now to discuss this is historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadel-Mankoo, who I believe is with me. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. Can this be true?
The founders of the National Trust and later figures involved in it, like my hero James Lees Mill, were really motivated by love of nation. But I think that love of nation in the Trust has become actively, national self-loathing. And that's really the state of modern Britain. And with the Trust, what we've done is we've actually entrusted our national heritage to those people who actually actively despise our national heritage. And it's, you know, it's utter madness.
Have these people wanted to take over charities like the National Trust for their political ends, or is it just something that happens? Is it just the type of people who work in charities?
This has been part of the long march through the institutions, that people need to understand that Britain is now a post-revolutionary society. So the buildings that house our institutions look the same, but the people who now run them bear no comparison to the generations who lovingly built and ran them. They are cuckoos in the nest, and we need to understand that. And of course, once you realize that, of course, that explains completely why, you know, the National Trust and others have crudely tried to denigrate our national heroes and link them and their houses to colonialism and slavery, as they ludicrously tried to do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:49. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, happy Halloween to you all. And Londonderry is hosting Europe's biggest Halloween festival, which is expected to attract more than 100,000 visitors. And who better to speak to is GB News' Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Dougie Beattie, you're looking ghoulishly fantastic today. Tell us more.
Well, welcome to the UK's most northwestern city. Of course, you've already mentioned the city of Londonderry. I've had all the remarks today, Martin, all of them. Yes, from Smurf to Mario, I've been there. But yeah, it is a fantastic festival. It's been running for 4 nights. This is the 4th night of it. The first 3 nights they were awakening the walls. This, of course, Londonderry has the very famous historical walls where the siege of Derry took place during the 1600s. It's actually why we have the modern monarchy that we have now, the constitutional monarchy, because this was part of the defeat of King James. And the council here have done something that amazed me. It's not often that councils amaze me with ratepayers' money, but they've invested over the last few decades in what started off really as a pub night out, with different pubs starting to get together, fancy dress, 38 years ago. And the council have came on the back of that, and they have built it and built it and built it. And I spoke to Aideen McCartan from the cultural side of Derry and Strabane Council, and this is what she had to say.
Hugely important. I mean, the festival is in its 38th years. It was started here locally. It's been developed by the people of the city. People here love Halloween. They love this time of year. As a local authority, between ourselves and our partners at Tourism Northern Ireland and Tourism Ireland, predominantly between ourselves, the local council and Tourism Northern Ireland, we invest around about £450,000 into this event every year, but we know that that brings a direct return of well over £3 million.
Martin, there was over 100,000 people in the city last night. I mean, there was queues here to get onto the walls for 45 minutes. So it shows you, I mean, I tried to book a hotel here last night, couldn't get one for miles. So it's obviously working. They estimate about £3 million coming back into this economy. So for once, my praise is with the council and how they've spent their money. But it is a fantastic cultural night out. We've had children on the stage. We've had ghouls, ghosts, ghost tours, fireworks is tonight, and of course that all wraps up tonight at about 8:30. There'll be a massive fireworks display after a festival parade throughout the city where everybody is dressed up. I mean, I'm standing here now, I've seen more ghouls, witches and cowboys, everything else that comes to pass as I'm standing here, and you'll need to be into the city for around about 6 o'clock tonight or you just won't get access to it.
Now, Dougie Beattie, I wonder if anybody's gone in fancy dress as Rachel Reeves on this Halloween. And on that point, on a more serious point, you made an excellent point yesterday, Dougie Beattie, about farms and inheritance tax and some sort of plan to drive farmers off land. I just spoke to a farmer a moment ago. He completely agrees, Dougie. He thinks something sinister is afoot.
Well, Martin, it's plain to see if you have to pay the tax on this, the price buy that land. No adjoining farm will buy that land because then they will face the same death duties. It struck me yesterday. If she has researched farming, she will know that farmers do not have £100,000 lying down the back of the sofa to bail out your average farm. So what she's presented them with is a bill that they cannot possibly pay. So the land will have to be sold, and you will find that that land will be given to people.
OK, Dougie Beattie, I think we've just lost contact. It must have been that alien in the background. I think he's just zapped your connection there, Dougie Beattie. But Dougie's making the point that the inheritance tax on land values will push many, many farmers into positions where they cannot afford to pay inheritance tax to maintain their farms. The government sweeps in, the government buys that cheap land, turns it into brownfield, builds housing estates, builds wind farms, converts it into land that they want, exporting social problems from cities to the countryside and forever changing the tapestry of our wonderful countryside. Now, we're crossing back to the northeast soon to hear what locals there make of the budget. Have they had a Halloween horror show? An astonishing figure came out today. £13 a week is the net growth target that's been come out from the Resolution Foundation. Doesn't that make you feel like getting out of bed each morning? £13 a week. Thank you very much and happy Halloween. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But next is your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some areas have been lucky to see sunshine today. Many others have been cloudy and it stays that way through the rest of the day. Mild though. However, it is increasingly wet and windy in the far north. Tightly packed isobars around the top of this area of higher pressure and weather fronts sinking south. So some heavier rain for a time, especially during the evening for Shetland. That rain pushing into Orkney and northwest Scotland overnight. A lot of low cloud here. Further south, we do have some cloud breaks for northeast England, more especially southern parts of England and South Wales. Some of those cloud breaks will continue overnight. And where we do see those cloud breaks, temperatures dipping into the mid-single figures, and there'll be a few mist patches around first thing Friday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover where we keep the cloud 10 or 11 degrees first thing. But a fairly gloomy start once again, whether you've got the cloud or those mist and fog patches. Certainly some cloud covering the hills of Wales and northern England, some drizzle here. More extensive drizzle coming into Northern Ireland and western and northern Scotland first thing Friday, but clearing from the far north. The wind's easing, but at the same time changing direction to bring colder air in to Shetland, Orkney, and then the far north of the mainland of Scotland. So starting the day, chilly here compared with recent mornings, and it's going to be a colder than average day in the far north. But elsewhere, we keep generally cloudy skies and mild weather. The rain fizzling out as it pushes into the central belt and the southeast of Scotland by the afternoon. And temperatures broadly 13 to 15 Celsius, except for the far north of Scotland, where it will be 6 to 8 degrees. Brighter skies, though, through Friday for the north of Scotland as this feature moves south across central and southeastern parts. That tends to fizzle out into the weekend as higher pressure builds once again. However, that does mean that many areas will remain largely cloudy.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Dumfries and Galloway, there's issues for the northbound A74M this afternoon. It's down to a single lane at the Lockerbie North turn-off at junction 17. We've had a vehicle hit a bridge there, so it's queuing. The Heathershead bypass in Norfolk, the northbound A11 remains closed between Windham heading through toward the Thickthorn roundabout up to the A47. Queuing there, an overturned tanker and a field spillage being dealt with. Seaside Road in Eastbourne is closed off by the Memorial roundabout for a police incident. And staying in that part of the world, if you're heading towards Essex, Edinburgh Way in Harlow is closed by the Burt Mill roundabout and queuing for serious collision in the roadworks. And in Cornwall, the A395 in Holworthy closed and queuing, and that again is at the scene of a collision there. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents, with a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. You'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Halloween. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Rachel Reeves's Halloween budget has been called a nightmare on Downing Street as the Chancellor has put the knife into pensioners, farmers, small business owners, landlords and even the humble boozers. Today, the Chancellor even admitted that working people's pay will be impacted, after all, by her tax hikes. And was it all trick and no treats? We'll be sinking our fangs into the details. And yesterday, when Rachel Reeves knocked just a penny off a pint of beer, Nigel Farage joked, great, I'll save £1 per week. But joking aside, in today's show, I'll talk to the landlady of one of my favourite boozers, the Dog and Parrot in Eastwood, and why she thinks the Chancellor's help is small beer to the hospitality sector. And farm owner Jeremy Clarkson has roared that British farmers have been shafted in the budget thanks to cruel inheritance tax changes that could harvest a state-fuelled land grab. I'll plough into the details with farmers and an NFU president. And you may have heard, rumour has it, that Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker. Well, on today's show, I'll talk to a real-life toolmaker, Conrad Pearson of Pearson Precision Toolmakers in Hereford. There he is. And Con reckons that Labour's budget has screwed his company, and may even force him to sack one of his lads. That's all coming up on today's show. Welcome to the show. Trick or treat? What did you make of yesterday's budget? There hasn't been a positive headline anywhere, even in the supportive press, even in The Guardian, the BBC. Everybody is looking for the good news story that simply isn't there. It was a horror show. It was a nightmare on Downing Street. British farmers absolutely wondering what the future holds in store for them after inheritance tax laws have been changed. Small businesses terrified about hiring new people because of spiralling costs of national insurance and also minimum wage. Landlords, pensioners, boozers, everybody wondering where is the bright light in the future. Let me know what you made of yesterday's horror show. GBNews.com/you'll say, perhaps I'm being too harsh. But anyway, here's your news headlines, and it's Mark White.
Good afternoon. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. And we begin with more breaking news on the devastating floods in Spain. The Spanish government has confirmed that the death toll has now risen to 158. Rescue efforts are continuing as authorities deal with the worst flooding in the country in decades. Dozens of people are still missing after the huge floods that swept the eastern province of Valencia and beyond. A 71-year-old British man is among those killed. Torrential rain swept through towns, dragging cars, downing bridges and leaving some people trapped in floodwaters. Well, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has declared 3 days of national mourning as the extreme conditions continue, restricting those rescue efforts. Hundreds of soldiers have now also been sent to Valencia to help in those rescue and recovery operations. The Prime Minister, his Chancellor and other members of the Cabinet have spent the day defending the biggest tax hike in a generation. The budget paves way for £40 billion a year in extra taxes. On a visit to an NHS trust in the Midlands, Sir Keir Starmer said the rise was the responsible thing to do to deal with the fiscal black hole and provide more money for public services.
We've had to do what is responsible to fix the foundations and rebuild our country. As I think is now well understood, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, money that wasn't accounted for by the last government. I'm not prepared to simply walk past that. We have to fix it. So we've done the responsible thing. The principles that we've put in place are to stabilise our economy and to invest in the future along with reform.
Well, the Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick has accused Labour of lying to the public in the run-up to the election. Mr Jenrick claims Rachel Reeves' budget will mean misery for millions and said the tax hike amounts to the complete opposite of what Labour said during the election campaign.
OBR were not willing to put their name to this idea that Rachel Reeves has said that there was a £20 billion black hole. I think that Rachel Reeves has been fundamentally dishonest. I mean, she's almost a compulsive liar. She said that taxes were not going to rise on working people before the general election. In fact, she said it 30 times. They've just risen. £40 billion of tax rises. She said there wasn't going to be any more borrowing. Borrowing has just massively increased. And then she invented this idea of a black hole.
The NHS has been handed a huge £22.6 billion boost in the budget. But many health experts are warning the funding for social care falls short. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has told GB News the Chancellor made a big judgment call, going for investment rather than decline.
What the funding the Chancellor's allocated to us will enable us to do is bring an end to 14 years of Conservative decline and start rebuilding our NHS, of course, starting with the biggest issue, which is the size of the waiting list, making sure we're getting those waiting lists down, making sure we're getting people seen faster. This is a process on reform, and this will be an ongoing process every day and every year that we are in government, and I'm the Health and Social Care Secretary. We will be delivering not just on investment, but also reform.
Donald Trump has hit back at President Joe Biden after he called Trump supporters garbage. The former US president told Wisconsin supporters they are the heart and soul of America as he praised sanitation workers.
Kamala and Joe,
call all of us, and them, even them, garbage. I call you the heart and soul of America. You are the heart and soul.
A prolific shoplifter has been banned from wearing wigs after numerous attempts to disguise herself while committing thefts. Gloucestershire police have confirmed that Hannah Roberts has donned a variety of headpieces to get around a shoplifting ban in Gloucester city centre. The 33-year-old had been banned by the City Safe scheme from entering any member shops, but had repeatedly ignored the sanction. Dear, I almost shouldn't ad-lib, but I'm assured it's all his own. It's back to Martin Daubney.
Excellent stuff, Mark White. Now, in the most left-wing budget for decades, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, pushed taxes to their highest level in history with a £40 billion tax bomb. In the last few moments, it has emerged that the pound suffered its biggest fall in 18 months, down 1.2% as the markets react to yesterday's budget. Well, was it a nightmare on Downing Street? Well, at GB News, we'd love to hear what you think, and every day we'll be running our poll of the day. And today we're asking the simple question: do you feel like a winner or a loser from the budget? And the final results will be announced in the next hour. So get yourself to the website and get your votes in. Well, now joined by the former Labour MP, great friend of the show, Stephen Pound. Stephen, welcome to the show. Now, I want to run you through a bit of the reaction, if I can, from the press of the day to the budget yesterday. Let's have a look at the press's reaction on the screen. Now, let's start with The Sun. You can see The Sun's front page. There she is, the pumpkin-headed Chancellor. At least she kept it down at the pumpkins. This, of course, referring to the fact that fuel duty, mercifully, wasn't increased. That was the one piece of good news. Let's move on now, if we can, to the Sun website. That's the homepage there. There she is, the Chancellor as Count Dracula, blood dripping from her fangs, no doubt, perhaps from farmers or pensioners or small business owners. Next, we're on to the Telegraph. Here's a column, here's a cartoon, beg your pardon, of the Chancellor, look, with that briefcase in the shape of a devilish pumpkin and a skull and crossbones around her neck. And finally, even The Guardian, that Bible, there are the Prime Minister and the Chancellor doing trick or treat, knocking on a door. The text there says, from a pumpkin-headed Prime Minister, saying, when do you think we should take our scary masks off? What scary masks? Says Rachel Reeves. Stephen Pound, of course, this is all playful fun, or is it? There's not been a single positive headline anywhere in the press. Everybody is saying this has been a nightmare on Downing Street.
Yeah, Martin, the golden rule of budgets is that the ones that appear brilliant the day after usually actually tank a couple of days later. Look, let's get a couple of things absolutely straight. Firstly, there was some damn good news in this budget. Firstly, all those postmasters and postmistresses who've been promised reparation for years by the Tories, never got any money, they're going to get it. The infected blood scandal, Labour are going to sort that out. But from my point of view, all the budgets I've seen, this is the only budget I can remember which actually talks about the long term. All other budgets have either been specious promises like Boris Johnson's, I'm going to build you 40 hospitals by Friday lunchtime, or immediate short-term stuff. This is a long-term budget. It's a huge gamble. But can we just get one thing absolutely straight? You can raise some individual cases about SME, small and medium enterprise business people. But look, no one's an island. If you're a small business, and you're worried about people shoplifting, you're worried about people can't get to your shop because of the potholes in the street, you're worried about your staff can't get proper health service. All those things involve the same process there. So when Labour talks about providing the building blocks for a future society, it's not in terms of each person as an individual. It's in terms of all of us. All of us have an interest in the NHS, in our defences and building housing. So I think that this is actually a really good one for the future. But my God, what a risk she's taken. However, you talked about the negative headlines. You talked about the pound. After, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's one, the pound tanked. It nearly went down to parity with the dollar. It's down less than 2%. But importantly, the FTSE 500, it's still in the high 800s, so 8,000s. So what's happened is the markets have not been spooked.
OK, Stephen, well, small businesses have. You said there nothing is an island, but it's been worked out today by the investment firm AJ Bell. They've worked out that the national insurance increase of 1.2%, which will cost
businesses £6 billion when accrued. And that's before we even start talking about the minimum wage hike, which will surely impact small businesses at the lower end. It's going to work out £800 for every fresh employee, for each existing employee, and taking on a new staff member would now cost £2,300 for every business. Now, if you're a small business and you want to expand by 2 or 3 people, Stephen, that's the difference between not employing anybody at all. This is a terrible budget for small businesses. There's no sugarcoating that on this Halloween.
Martin, if those figures were accurate, yes, I'd be terrified, but they're not. I mean, sorry, those are just grabbing fantasy figures out of the air. AJ Bell are talking about a whole range of hypothetical situations there. You talk to some people who really are SME owners and small business people. It's a very different story. But just get back to the main point. There's no point in actually having the same rate of national insurance if everything around you doesn't work. We've got to make this country work. We've got to fix it. We've got to get it right. We've got to stop the shoplifting and the potholes and the collapsing NHS. And it's those things that this budget is doing. And I say, Stephen, fair play to them.
Did you see this morning, the OBR, the OBR, which, by the way, we're waiting for this budget to be put out before they verified the figures. There's £22 billion black hole. They've actually cast a lot of doubt over that. They said, actually, it might only have been £9.5 billion of hidden costs in Jeremy Hunt's final budget. So maybe the whole thing is a phantom budget on this Halloween.
Well, that's quite an appropriate metaphor. But look, Martin, two things. First of all, what's that word you just said? Might. It's hypothetical. This is a guess. The second thing is, you've got
this is the OBR saying it. It's not plucked from thin air. This is the OBR.
Sorry, they're saying it might. They're not saying it is. But look, the other thing is, you've got eyes. Look around you. Look at the way this country is broken at the moment. Look at the state of our transport, the National Health Service, the armed forces. Look at all those things. Look at the carers. Look at the prisons. Look at all those things that need fixing. We either say that we're happy as we are and we're going to just let it go rot, or we're going to do something about it. And the only way to do something about it is to raise the money. I'll give you one point. I have to think. The thing with the farmers, a huge number of farmers in this country, they're massive multinational companies, particularly the barley farmers, the barley barons. And people like Jeremy Clarkson, he's not some farmer Giles getting up with his Wellington boots at 5 in the morning. He's got a shop, he's got a restaurant. There's many things that we need to look at. Family farmers need to be protected. But business farms, which happen to be Airbnb and on the side of a lambing field, I think, honestly, they deserve to actually have another look at. But by and large, this is one for the future. This is a sensible, serious, grown-up budget, and it's away from the flim-flam, the nonsense and the empty promises we've had in the past.
Well, Stephen Pound, I'm glad you mentioned farmer, because I spoke to a farmer before you came on, Charles Goby. He's an arable and a beef farmer from Warwickshire. He pointed out that actually £1 million farm is only 65 acres at current prices. 65 acres is barely a small holding. It's a myth to make out that the multinationals were the only one get hit by this. Small intergenerational farms that have been struggling to even stay ahead. He was saying he's been working for half of the minimum wage when you add up his hours just to keep his farm afloat, just to stand still. People like him could be facing inheritance tax bills of the thick end of £250,000 upon his death. His son would have to pay that off just to keep going. They can't afford to pay that off. It means selling assets. It means getting further into debt. It means annihilating British agriculture at a time when we should not be relying on importing food from abroad with the net zero impact. We should be supporting British agriculture. British farmers are saying that yesterday's budget was a disaster for farmers.
Well, let me just agree with you. And I'm sorry, don't get steam coming out of your ear here, because I actually agree with a lot of what you've just said. The people who've been shafting the farmers for the last 25 to 30 years are the supermarkets. They've been driving prices down. They've been screwing the farmers left, right and centre. And the other thing that the farmers have been suffering from is the way that we seem to find it easier to bring in tomatoes.
So why not tax the supermarkets instead of the farmers? Do something about that.
Because if we tax the supermarkets, we're actually taxing the consumers. We've got to stop this process of not buying local. We've got to stop bringing in avocados from Ecuador and tomatoes from southern Spain. It's ludicrous. Look, I think this business about the family farms needs to be looked at. And equally, I think we need to differentiate between the multinational barley barons and those family farms. And I think fair play to GB News. You're shining a spotlight on this, and good luck to you on that one. But overall, this budget is a grown-up, serious and sensible budget. In the past, as I said, ones that go up like a rocket usually come down like the stick. This is one which had a slow burn, and I think that the comments later will be a bit different. But don't forget, a lot of the interest rates problem are actually to do with what the situation is in America, where if Mr. Trump, God forbid, wins next week, tariffs will actually be screwing our economy. Then we'll have a huge problem, and that's one that you and I are going to be lying awake at night sweating bullets over.
Well, I certainly think people on the Liberal left will be having a second Halloween on Bonfire Night if it looks increasingly likely that Donald Trump will get in. That's a separate story for another day.
Absolutely.
Stephen Power, thank you as ever for being a great sport and joining us here on GB News. Cheers, mate. Let's cross now to our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, who's at one of my favourite boozers. She's at the Dog and Parrot there in Eastwood. A wicked boozer that is. Will, over to you.
Yes, well, I suppose the hangover after the budget is a bit like when people leave the pub. Some people might be feeling a little bit more upbeat and a little bit merrier, others a little bit worse for wear. And I think the pub is the perfect place to come to speak to Catherine Bohm, who is the owner of the Dog and Parrot in Eastwood. I imagine you've got some very happy staff because they're probably getting a raise on the minimum wage, but what does that mean for you and for your business?
National insurance plus wage rise means £2,000 a year at least for me, so that's another £2,000 that will have to come out of the business, you know, so it does have a knock-on effect, unfortunately. So myself and my husband are on payroll as well, so basically the staff will get the pay rise and I don't think me and my husband will, so we've just got to work it, see how we go really. So
a lot of ordinary working people, to use the phrase, will be quite happy to see that they might be getting a little bit more money. What's the actual effect for small business owners like yourself?
Yeah, well, if you've got staff, obviously everybody's all on the books. You've got to obviously pay your national insurance, which has gone at 1.2. So I've sat and worked out, and it, for me, just because there's 5 of us, the cost for the year is £2,000. So, but anything else might go up as well. So it's just a knock-on effect, really.
One of the things that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has announced in the budget is that for businesses that are small, that have fewer than 4 employees, they won't be paying any additional national insurance contributions. I believe it's actually that they won't be paying any for those employees. But just tell me about how many staff you have and what those national insurance contributions will mean.
There's 5 of us all in all, so I say adding that with the pay rise, it makes you £2,000. So, and we've just done a pay increase for the bills and that for the year. I only do a pay increase once a year because I don't think it's fair to my customers. So once a year that pay rise goes on, normally around the 1st of September. So I've just done that. So I won't be putting any prices up because we will then take the hit ourselves.
The government figures suggest that it will be about £25 billion that will be raised from raising the national insurance contributions made by employers. And what will that mean for your business? They say that the Rachel Reeves says that it's the right thing to do to prop up the economy. They say that there is a £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives. Is it the right thing to do to be taxing in this way?
The small businesses are the ones that keep everybody going. If you start off at the bottom and you increase up, that's when you get to the bigger businesses. So if you haven't got the small businesses, you're not going to have the big businesses.
And then very quickly, just what about that 1p off the pint? Is that going to do any good for pubs?
No. Definitely not, because at the end of the day, the breweries have got to employ their staff. That 1 pence will basically be sunk into their wage rise that like us, we've got to take. So that 1p, no, I would say no pub is ever going to see that 1 pence.
Catherine, thank you so much for speaking to us today on GB News. You can see that it's a very busy pub here in the background, Martin, and I imagine even though that there might be a few people here that are feeling the pinch of the budget, they're going to be enjoying a lovely evening here in Nottinghamshire as well.
Well, Dog and Parrot there, Nottingham Road and Eastwood. Kath, hello, darling. I spent many an evening in there during the 2019 general election campaign with your fella, Dave. Do a huge amount of work for local charities, mental health charities, military charities. Cracking boozer, get yourself down the Dog and Parrot. Support your local juicer. Now, I'm joined now by Emily Carver, again live up there from in County Durham. Emily, who are you with this time and the great British public you speak to on our behalf on GB News?
Yeah, thanks very much, Martin, for checking in on me. I feel like I've met as many dogs as I have people in my time up here in Stanley in County Durham. But I am now delighted to be with Barry Bridge, and this one is Luna. So there you go. You can meet Luna as well. 2 for 1. 2 for 1 offer in this house. Barry, so we were talking a little bit earlier, and you think it's a bit of a disgrace that the winter fuel payments were taken away from so many pensioners.
Yeah, I do, because, like I say, a lot of people... It just got state pensions. Once you pay your rent, buy your food, etc., there's not a lot left. and they kind of put the heating on all the time, not they need it. So, yeah, it is a disgrace.
And you listened to some of the budget yesterday. You've seen some of the headlines. Now, you were saying to me that, you know, whatever budget there is, things don't seem to get much better. What do you think about this one?
They don't, and I don't think this one will get much better for us, because the people with the money, the big wigs, what's got all the millions and everything, and the big businesses, they're not going to carry the can. They're going to up the prices, and they're going to pass the prices down, so the working people, the ordinary people, are going to have to pay higher prices for food, higher prices for petrol and diesel, and such like. And so we're going to be no better off.
And what about the local, the high street and shops and small cafes that may only hire, you know, between 1 and 10 people? What about those?
Some of them are going to suffer, because there was a fella on the telly this morning was on, like, they were going to hire 4, he needed to hire 4 people to help him run his business. And he says, I'll not be able to afford it. He says, I might be able to hire 2 or even 3 on a part-time basis. And then there was a big company said he was going to hire 300 people. But now, since the budget, he says, I've had to cut it down to about 80, and maybe it's even down to 50.
Yeah.
You know, so it's going to hit everybody somewhere along the line.
Yeah, Labour did say that this was going to be a budget for growth, but if that man's putting off those decisions on hiring and all of that, it's not much for economic growth, I suppose. But your wife, she's been in a care home for a while.
Yeah,
for
7.5 years.
7.5 years, and you go to visit her every single day, 7 days a week. And there's a lot of care home staff there as well, and some of them are doing a really good job. One thing for them is the minimum wage.
Yeah, they only, the staff down there is only on £10, about £10.40 an hour. They've got to work 12-hour shifts. So that's less than the minimum wage, to be honest, isn't it? Because I was told, it said on the telly this morning, the minimum wage was £11 something. And so if they get a £2 odd rise in next April, the income tax is going to go up for a start. Prices are going to go up. Fuel's going to go up. So they're not going to be any better off.
Well, Barry, we'll leave it there. But thank you very much indeed for welcoming me into your home to meet you, Barry Bridge, and of course Luna the dog here. It's been a long day, but it's been a really interesting day up here in Stanley, County Durham, getting to know what people really think about the budget and what it might mean for their lives. Thank you very much.
Emily, Barry and Luna, wonderful reporting. Thank you so much for allowing us into your front room and into your life and giving us some insight into what truly matters. That's what we try and do here with the People's Channel. Magnificent. Now, our very own Christopher Hope will be sitting down with the Chancellor Rachel Reeves later this Halloween afternoon. If you've got any pertinent questions for the Chancellor, then get them through to us here at gbnews.com/your say. I'll get them to Chopper and he can get them to the Chancellor. Now, my fellow GB News presenter Michelle Dewberry joins me next as she has a very exclusive interview tonight. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education Chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history, Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:28. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, Michelle Dewberry joins me now. She has an exclusive interview tonight. Michelle, what do you have in store?
Martin, well, we've all followed the horrendous situation in Southport and everything that happened off the back of that. And we've also followed with a keen eye the amount of people that have basically been locked up and had the key thrown away. Well, one guy really caught my eye. A former prison guard. He was in trouble. He found himself the wrong side of the law for some of the stuff that he tweeted out. Take a listen to some of the things that he's had to say.
7 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. About 7 officers turned up at my door. I was the only one awake. My lad was downstairs with me. There was 3 officers at all time. It was like I was a murderer, if I'm honest. The security around me was weird. It was like I was some kind of mass murderer or something. There was a lot of pressure to plead guilty. There was talks of there's no way out of this. People are being put into prison. There was an awful lot of pressure. I felt a lot of pressure to be going down that route. There was an incident where I ended up with black eye. I did felt I had a target on my back. At the end of the day, we are all of us, custodians of free speech.
A normal guy outraged by what went on in Southport. He found himself, as he said, at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 officers at his door. He spent weeks in prison. He was pressured, he says, to plead guilty. He resisted that, pleaded not guilty, and a jury trial lasting a week, Martin. It basically declared he was not guilty. He tells me his story tonight at 6 o'clock.
Bravo, that's absolutely bang on, because you know what? So many of those lads and ladies were terrified of speaking out. They were told to take those guilty pleas. I heard many of those stories. Very, very few of them had the guts to speak out. Michelle Dewberry, fantastic exclusive. Make sure you tune into that later on. Jubes and Co. Cracking exclusive. Well done. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including, has Labour betrayed our farmers? Well, we'll get the President of the National Farmers Union of Scotland's reaction. You will not want to miss that. But first, here's your headlines with Mark White.
Well, just after 4:30, the main headlines from the GB News Centre. And the Spanish government has now confirmed the death toll from the devastating floods in the country has risen again, this time to 158. Rescue efforts are continuing as authorities deal with the worst flooding in the country in decades. Dozens of people are still missing after the huge floods that swept the eastern province of Valencia and beyond. A 71-year-old British man is among those killed. Well, torrential rain inundated towns, dragging cars, downing bridges and leaving some people trapped in waters. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has declared 3 days of national mourning as the extreme conditions continue, restricting some rescue efforts. The Prime Minister, his Chancellor and other members of the Cabinet have spent the day defending the biggest tax hike in a generation. Yesterday's budget paves the way for £40 billion a year in extra taxes. On a visit to an NHS trust in the Midlands, Sir Keir Starmer said the rise was the responsible thing to do to deal with the fiscal black hole and provide more money for public services.
We've had to do what is responsible to fix the foundations and rebuild our country. As I think is now well understood, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, money that wasn't accounted for by the last government. I'm not prepared to simply walk past that. We have to fix it. So we've done the responsible thing. The principles that we've put in place are to stabilise our economy and to invest in the future along with reform.
Well, the Conservative leadership candidate Robert Jenrick has accused Labour of lying to the public in the run-up to the election. Mr Jenrick claims Rachel Reeves' budget will mean misery for millions and said the tax hike amounts to the complete opposite of what Labour said during the election campaign. From today, safe access zones will be introduced to create a 150-metre wide area outside abortion clinics. The protection areas will be introduced outside all abortion clinics in England and Wales to ensure women seeking abortion services will be better protected from harassment or distress. The new legislation will stop anti-abortion campaigners from handing out leaflets, holding vigils and showing graphic images to women near the sites. Lawyers acting for alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed have said they've now been contacted by 400 people. Speaking at a news conference, Dean Armstrong KC said those who have contacted the Justice for Harrods Survivors Group are not just from Harrods, but from Fulham FC and various places associated with Al-Fayed. A string of allegations have been made against the former Harrods owner following the release of a documentary about the businessman who died last year. And those are your latest headlines from GB News for the time being. Now back to Martin Daubney.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some areas have been lucky to see sunshine today. Many others have been cloudy and it stays that way through the rest of the day. Mild though. However, it is increasingly wet and windy in the far north. Tightly packed isobars around the top of this area of higher pressure and weather fronts sinking south. So some heavier rain for a time, especially during the evening for Shetland. That rain pushing into Orkney and northwest Scotland overnight. A lot of low cloud here. Further south, we do have some cloud breaks for northeast England, more especially southern parts of England and South Wales. Some of those cloud breaks will continue overnight. And where we do see those cloud breaks, temperatures dipping into the mid-single figures, and there'll be a few mist patches around first thing Friday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover where we keep the cloud 10 or 11 degrees first thing. But a fairly gloomy start once again, whether you've got the cloud or those mist and fog patches. Certainly some cloud covering the hills of Wales and northern England, some drizzle here. More extensive drizzle coming into Northern Ireland and western and northern Scotland first thing Friday, but clearing from the far north. The wind's easing, but at the same time changing direction to bring colder air in to Shetland, Orkney, and then the far north of the mainland of Scotland. So starting the day, chilly here compared with recent mornings. and it's going to be a colder than average day in the far north. But elsewhere, we keep generally cloudy skies and mild weather. The rain fizzling out as it pushes into the central belt and the southeast of Scotland by the afternoon. And temperatures broadly 13 to 15 Celsius, except for the far north of Scotland, where it will be 6 to 8 degrees. Brighter skies, though, through Friday for the north of Scotland as this feature moves south across central and southeastern parts. That tends to fizzle out into the weekend as higher pressure builds once again. However, that does mean that many areas will remain largely cloudy.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. There's some congestion building on the southbound M6 junction 26 to 25. That's the Orwell interchange down towards Bryn. 2 lanes are out. Debris on the road still being cleaned up there. There's queues from Bath to Bristol on the westbound M4. Now, there was a condition on the hard shoulder, but very slow still from junction 18 towards 19. Long delays in Buckinghamshire. The northbound M40 from junction 4, the High Wycombe Handy Cross roundabout. Now, that's part blocked. A vehicle fire causing queues back towards the A404 approaching junction 4. Northbound M1 away from Luton, 10 up to 11, a lane shutting queues for a collision. Dartford Tunnel anti-clock M25, both tunnels now open, follows an earlier bump, but the queue anti-clock is back before Swanley at junction 3. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:37. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, you may remember a few weeks ago that Madapasa, the brazen immigrants who posted a number of clips on social media boasting about coming to the UK and even appearing to threaten Nigel Farage. Well, it now appears that he's arrived in the UK. Take a look at this. We've got an exclusive video on screen for those listening on radio. Madapasa, as we can see here, let's get that up now. He filmed himself along with other migrants apparently crossing the English Channel in a packed dinghy, a familiar sight. Well, the Home Office have been contacted for a comment. We'll keep you updated throughout the show. Here's that video.
Hey, hela UK after me folket. Kolla fem båtar efter me folket. De vet att Madapasa kommer. Kolla där. Det är fem båtar.
So just a reminder, he's got an AK-47 tattooed on his face, and he made threatening gun noise gestures towards the screen, saying, Nigel Farage, stop talking about me, in what many took as a direct threat towards the safety and perhaps even the life of Nigel Farage. That video, which we've just obtained from Madapasa's own TikTok feed, appears to show him on a dinghy on his way to the UK, with a huge implication, I believe, for the safety of Nigel Farage. And as we've just said, the Home Office have been contacted for a comment, and we'll keep you updated throughout the show. Now, moving on, family farms will be hit with inheritance tax rises after the Chancellor unveiled plans yesterday to scale back agricultural relief on land valued at more than £1 million. Now, the National Farmers Union say that these changes could be the final straw for many farmers. And let's get the thoughts now of the President of the NFU Scotland, Martin Kennedy. Martin, welcome to the show. Spoke with a farmer earlier on the show, Charles Goby, out of Warwickshire, multi-generational farmer, very, very fearful of what this could mean for the future of his farm. Jeremy Clarkson saying farmers have been shafted. What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's extremely worrying and concerning that the government didn't listen to us. We had been given assurance by Labour when they were in opposition that they would have no plans to do anything with agricultural property relief or inheritance tax, and to see this happening through no consultation. Once we began to hear some rumours about this happening, all the UK unions got together and wrote to the Chancellor and highlighted what the unintended consequences would be. But the unintended consequences are the pressure this is putting on agriculture is immense. I mean, there's already pressure on farmers and crofters throughout Scotland and indeed throughout the whole of the UK. But It's not just the financial pressures this puts on. This is putting mental health pressures on a number of farming families that just don't know where to turn. And what is this going to mean in the long term? Because it doesn't take a very big farm to reach the threshold of £1 million. And the tax implications that there's going to be in farmers throughout the whole of the UK is going to be incredible. And I think it's very short-sighted, and it's highlighted the lack of understanding of how agriculture works throughout the whole of the UK.
Martin Kennedy, do you think the Chancellor, or in fact almost everybody in politics, has got a Scooby-Doo about how hard it is to make money from farming these days? The margins are being forced down by the big supermarkets, the increase in costs, everything, the feed, the fuel, the labour, the costs are going through the roof, the margins are going down. Have they got a blooming clue?
Well, that's the problem, and all too often people make decisions about agriculture that don't understand the implications, and that's always the worry, because what always happens is farmers have to pick up the pieces of the decisions that are made, and 9 times out of 10, by the time these pieces have been picked up, the people that have made these decisions are no longer in power, and that's extremely frustrating. Farming's a long-term industry, a huge long-term industry with massive benefits to not only supplying food, but the caretakers of the environment, looking at climate change, and actually rural communities. If it wasn't for farming and crofting, particularly in Scotland, we wouldn't have rural communities that are thriving. The return on investment is incredible. Back to the Exchequer, the return on investment for every pound that's spent, there's £7, £8, £9 back into the rural economy. And from a Scottish perspective, it's a very small amount. But when it comes to agricultural property relief, the significance of this is massive. The return on investment from agriculture is huge. In Scotland, we get about 620 million of support comes into agriculture. The return on that delivers a £3 billion output, and that's the catalyst to the £16 billion food and drink industry in Scotland. It's massive. So they're actually risking this massively by the threats it's putting this on agriculture, farmers and croppers, particularly the next generation. Because if something happens in a farm and the implications and the tax relief here, there's just not the margins there to cope with that. So that's going to lead to huge unintended consequences, and ultimately it's going to be the taxpayer and our consumer that will have to pick up the pieces, because no longer will we be able to provide the food and produce the food in this country to the standards, environmental standards, animal health and welfare standards that we've been used to for so long. That's actually what's getting put at risk here. But in terms of the immediate impact, it's the worry, the mental health issues this is going to cause throughout farming families throughout the UK. And I think it really highlights the lack of understanding of decisions being made by people that do not understand the industry.
Martin, anybody with half a brain knows that no farms equals no food, or certainly it means more imported food with all the subsequent cost implications and the carbon footprint of doing that. It's madness to import food we could produce domestically. But can I ask you another point? Dougie Beattie, our Northern Ireland reporter, he said he's been speaking to farmers in Northern Ireland and they think something else is going on here. They think that they want their farms to go out of business in government so the land can be hoovered up, potentially by the government. They need to build housing estates. They need to build wind farms. They need to build their solar farms. Maybe there's a vested interest in turning farmland into brownfield so they can scoop it up and convert it. Is that a conspiracy theory, or might it have some merit?
Well, I don't know if there's any merit in that at all, but if that was the case, it would be extremely unwise, because let's not forget that the one thing we cannot do without is food. If the power goes off, yes, I totally understand it's a disaster. People are used to heating, they're used to light, they're used to being able to switch on a switch. If there's no food in front of you and you look what happens across the world, it's an extremely different, a really worrying situation. There's 800 million people across the globe, remember, still go to bed without a proper meal, and they go, particularly hungry. That's worrying. When you look at the geopolitical situation there is across the globe just now, when you look at how climate change is affecting other parts of the world, yes, it's affecting us here, and we've got to mitigate against that and do our utmost to play our part to mitigate against that. But first and foremost, we need to be in a position and enabled to produce food to the standards that we've been used to within the whole of the UK. And if we don't do that, we do that at our peril. Because the reality is right now, we've got less of an opportunity to import from other parts of the world because of the previous situations I've just highlighted. Climate change is having a massive effect. Yes, we know rain has been a massive problem here, but you look at other parts of the world where if you don't have any rain at all, it's a lot more challenging. And the geopolitical situation is not helping. Issues still around the Middle East, issues with Ukraine. We need to focus much more on our own food security. We're good at it here. In Scotland, I would say we're the best at it in Scotland, but throughout the whole of the UK, I think we do a fantastic job of producing food. The problem we have now is we've been taking it for granted for far too long. We now, at the minute, are only spending about 12-13% of our disposable income, on average, on our food. Now, I fully understand and respect people that are on real hardship are paying a lot more than that, and it's a real struggle. That's where government should step in. But let's not forget, an average figure comes from somewhere, so there's an awful lot of people in the country paying a lot less than 13% of their disposable income in food. The reason we're paying that is because we take it for granted.
Can I quickly interject? We've got a quick 30 seconds here. We've been very gentlemanly about this and so far in the UK, very Queensberry rules. It hasn't been that way in France or in Holland and across the continent. We've seen silage sprayed at Brussels. We've seen tyres set fire to. How far can British farmers go before they're driven to similar measures?
Well, I think that it gets to the stage where actually, instead of doing that, we stop producing food. And the reality is that there's not a margin there. If we're not looked after to support that, farmers will survive. So let's not forget, farmers will survive regardless, because they're the most adaptable industry there's ever been. What will fall apart is the whole supply chain and the critical mass of product that's required to keep the whole industry up and running is the bit that will fall apart first, and then ultimately the consumer will be paying through the nose for their food. That's not what we want to do. We want to have affordable food, but we need recognition for what farmers throughout the UK have not only just been doing up to now. We've been looking after the environment, we've been producing food for generations. We will continue to do that, but only if we're enabled to do that and have the support and recognition for what we're doing, and we're not taken simply for granted.
Magnificent. That's a real rabble-rousing speech there. Very braveheart. Martin Kennelly, President of the NFU Scotland. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Don't forget, no farmers, no food. Now, still to come, we'll get the latest on the US election after Donald Trump rode a garbage truck in a stunt to damage the Democrats' campaign. So what you like about him, the guy is a PR machine. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The former royal correspondent for the Sun newspaper, Charles Ray. Good to see you this morning, Charles, and so good to see Catherine back to work with a hug.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, there are a few royal jobs that touch at the heartstrings, and this is certainly one of those. And I think it's the first time we've actually seen Catherine back in a royal duty since she herself confirmed that she'd finished chemotherapy.
Done so much, haven't they, the Princess of Wales and the King, to raise awareness for these cancers.
Here we have both the King and Catherine having, explained to the nation and the rest of the world that they were battling or are still battling cancer, just like everyone else.
How sincere is all of this? I mean, it looks like she's a wonderful, kind, caring woman, but I don't know. I've never met her.
Well, she is a wonderful, kind, caring woman. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And William heard about this young lady on a visit to the air ambulance, and they invited her because she's a photographer, so she wanted to take. She has a bucket list and wanted to take pictures of an investiture. I mean, make no mistake, people like Catherine are just absolutely wonderful in what they do and how they do it. I mean, and Catherine is the superstar of the royal family. Of that, there is no doubt.
It's the cockles of my heart, Charles. It really does. It's really good to see you. Thanks very much.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Charles. Thanks. And Liz, who is this 16-year-old amateur photographer who was hugged by Princess of Wales yesterday, said it was a dream come true.
I bet it was.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time. It's 10 to 5. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, with less than a week now until the US election, Donald Trump has stepped up his campaign. Following the comments from President Joe Biden about Donald Trump supporters being garbage, the Republican nominee was spotted driving a garbage truck in Wisconsin to mock Biden's comment. And joining me now to discuss this down the line is the Democratic strategist and the former spokesperson for Barack Obama, Federico de Jesus. Federico, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Now, say what you like about the guy. When he's dealt lemons, he makes lemonade. You have to admit, Biden saying that his supporters were garbage and then he rocks up in a garbage truck. It is a PR masterclass.
Thank you for having me, Martin, and thank you for your viewers for tolerating me. Look, you are right. He is a showman, and he's seizing on something that is very unfortunate and very ill-timed for Democrats. All of us remember when in 2016, Hillary Clinton unfortunately called Trump supporters a basket full of deplorables, and Trump is correctly seizing on this. Now, it's not his opponent, but it is the sitting president of the United States. And I think that you speak to every Democrat, and they're trying to downplay it on the record, but off the record, they're telling you that they're worried. And the legendary GOP pollster Frank Luntz told CNN yesterday that this is something that could damage and will be a turning point in this election. Now, will this be the deciding factor? Not sure. His theory is that there's a 3% of the undecided electorate that is leaning toward Trump, but that doesn't agree with his insults or his rhetoric or, frankly, his racism, but they like his policies. And this could be the driving factor for them. Now, obviously, there are other issues, the economy, abortion, immigration. Kamala Harris surged today in certain swing states. She's still tied in Pennsylvania. So this is very tight race right now, and anything could swing the election.
Federico, do you think looking back, I mean, Donald Trump does seem to be edging ahead now across the polls. We've got a quick minute here. Do you think looking back, the Democrats might regret making their campaign so negative about Donald Trump being a racist, a fascist, comparing him to Hitler? Is it enough just to attack your opponent rather than offering solid policies on the economy, on border control?
Well, it's his former chief of staff and generals who called him a fascist that admired Hitler. And so it is a contrast election. And yes, Kamala Harris has talked about lowering prices, having an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, and protecting the border. She should be more specific on her policies. She only jumped in the summer for the campaign, and she does have a record to defend as vice president. So I don't see Donald Trump talking about policy at all, only ranting. So this is a very unique time in American history, and this is a vibe election, and we'll see whose vibe is ringing more true with the electorate.
Magnificent. Well, it's Halloween here in the UK, and that election is on bonfire night. We will be expecting fireworks. Federico de Jesus, an absolute pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us there live from the US of A. Now, rumour has it that Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker. Well, next, I'll talk to a real-life toolmaker who reckons Labour's budget has screwed his company. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now, here's your Halloween weather with Aidan McGibbon.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some areas have been lucky to see sunshine today. Many others have been cloudy and it stays that way through the rest of the day. Mild though. However, it is increasingly wet and windy in the far north. Tightly packed isobars around the top of this area of higher pressure and weather fronts sinking south. So some heavier rain for a time, especially during the evening for Shetland. That rain pushing into Orkney and northwest Scotland overnight. A lot of low cloud here. Further south, we do have some cloud breaks for northeast England, more especially southern parts of England and South Wales. Some of those cloud breaks will continue overnight. And where we do see those cloud breaks, temperatures dipping into the mid-single figures, and there'll be a few mist patches around first thing Friday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover where we keep the cloud 10 or 11 degrees first thing. But a fairly gloomy start once again, whether you've got the cloud or those mist and fog patches. Certainly some cloud covering the hills of Wales and northern England, some drizzle here. More extensive drizzle coming into Northern Ireland and western and northern Scotland first thing Friday, but clearing from the far north. The wind's easing, but at the same time changing direction to bring colder air in to Shetland, Daubney, and then the far north of the mainland of Scotland. So starting the day chilly here compared with recent mornings, and it's going to be a colder than average day in the far north. But elsewhere we keep generally cloudy skies and mild weather. The rain fizzling out as it pushes into the central belt and the southeast of Scotland by the afternoon. And temperatures broadly 13 to 15 Celsius, except for the far north of Scotland, where it will be 6 to 8 degrees. Brighter skies, though, through Friday for the north of Scotland as this feature moves south across central and southeastern parts. That tends to fizzle out into the weekend as higher pressure builds once again. However, that does mean that many areas will remain largely cloudy.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues building on the eastbound M62, so Birchwood to Eccles, that's 11 to 12. 2 lanes are coned off. There's a broken down vehicle causing delays to build. There's one as well southbound on the M6. It's just after Middlewich at 18, a lane shut and delays. A lane shut again, a breakdown northbound on the M6, Stoke at 16, up towards Crewe at 17, causing queues as well. Northbound M40 just after junction 4, that's the High Wycombe Handy Cross roundabouts, parts blocked. Big queues back towards the A404 for a vehicle fire. Westbound M4 at Reading, 11, 2 lanes out in queues. That's due to a collision. The earlier collision around Luton on the northbound side of the M1. Well, better news there. All lanes are currently back open. We're looking at the live cameras. Still seeing patchy queues on that northbound side. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,000 and £25 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Halloween. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting, of course, live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Rachel Reeves's Halloween budget has been called a nightmare on Downing Street as the Chancellor put the knife into pensioners, farmers, small business owners, landlords and even the great British boozers. Today, the Chancellor even admitted working people's pay will be impacted by her tax hikes. Was it all trick and no treats? We'll sink our fangs into the details. And now rumour has it that Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker. Well, on today's show, I'll be joined by the real-life son of a toolmaker, Conrad Pearson of Pearson Precision Toolmakers in Hereford. Con reckons Labour's budget has screwed his company and may force him to sack one of his lads. And killjoy dentists and sourpussers at the Royal College of Surgeons have suggested we should give kids stickers, not sweets, for this year's trick or treat on Halloween to avoid tooth decay. Does their idea have teeth, or is nothing safe from the fun vampires? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show and happy Halloween. Now, did you know that Sir Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker? Now, that may have avoided you during the general election campaign. There are tribes in the Amazon that are familiar with the fact that Sir Keir Starmer's father was a toolmaker. The last known humans on Earth have surely got this tidbit in their systems. Well, I'm about to speak to a real-life son of a toolmaker from Conrad, and he was saying today that the budget yesterday has been disastrous for his small business, and in fact, it might lead to him having to lay off some of his staff. Has the budget impacted you? Was it all trick and no treats? Send your views, gbnews.com/your say. But before we crack on, here's your headlines, and it's Mark White.
At 5:02, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. The Spanish government has confirmed the death toll from the devastating floods in the country has now risen to 158. Rescue efforts are continuing as authorities deal with the worst flooding in the country in decades. Dozens of people are still missing after the huge floods that swept the eastern province of Valencia and beyond. A 71-year-old British man is among those killed. Torrential rain inundated towns, dragging cars, downing bridges and leaving some people trapped in floodwaters. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has declared 3 days of national mourning as the extreme conditions continue, restricting some rescue efforts. Hundreds of soldiers have now been sent to Valencia to help in those rescue and recovery operations. The Prime Minister, his Chancellor and other members of the Cabinet have spent the day defending the biggest tax hike in a generation. Yesterday's budget paves the way for £40 billion a year in extra taxes. On a visit to an NHS trust in the Midlands, Sir Keir Starmer said the rise was the responsible thing to do to deal with the fiscal black hole and provide more money for public services.
We've had to do what is responsible to fix the foundations and rebuild our country. As I think is now well understood, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, money that wasn't accounted for by the last government. I'm not prepared to simply walk past that. We have to fix it. So we've done the responsible thing. The principles that we've put in place are to stabilise our economy and to invest in the future along with reform.
The Conservative leadership candidate, Robert Jenrick, has accused Labour of lying to the public in the run-up to the election. Mr Jenrick claims Rachel Reeves's budget will mean misery for millions and said the tax hike amounts to the complete opposite of what Labour said during the election campaign.
OBR were not willing to put their name to this idea that Rachel Reeves has said that there was a £20 billion black hole. I think that Rachel Reeves has been fundamentally dishonest. I mean, she's almost a compulsive liar. She said that taxes were not going to rise on working people before the general election. In fact, she said it 30 times. They've just risen. £40 billion of tax rises. She said there wasn't going to be any more borrowing. Borrowing has just massively increased. And then she invented this idea of a black hole.
Well, the NHS has been handed a huge £22.6 billion boost in the budget. But many health experts are warning the funding for social care falls short. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has told GB News the Chancellor made a big judgment call, going for investment rather than decline.
What the funding the Chancellor's allocated to us will enable us to do is bring an end to 14 years of Conservative decline and start rebuilding our NHS, of course, starting with the biggest issue, which is the size of the waiting list, making sure we're getting those waiting lists down, making sure we're getting people seen faster. This is a process on reform, and this will be an ongoing process every day and every year that we are in government, and I'm the Health and Social Care Secretary. We will be delivering not just on investment, but also reform.
Donald Trump has hit back at President Joe Biden after he called Trump supporters garbage. The former US president told Wisconsin supporters they are the heart and soul of America as he praised sanitation workers.
Kamala and Joe call all of us, and them, even them, garbage. I call you the heart and soul of America. You are the heart and soul.
Detectives investigating the theft of more than 22 tonnes of cheese from an artisan cheese supplier have arrested a 63-year-old man. A Metropolitan Police spokesman said police received a report of the theft of a large quantity of cheese from Neil's Yard Dairy in South Southwark in the South London. Investigating officers have since arrested the 63-year-old man on suspicion of fraud by false representation and the handling of stolen goods. And those are your headlines for the moment. Now it's back to Martin Daubney.
Thank you, Mark White. And great by the police there. They carefully cracked that case. Now, in the most left-wing budget for decades, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves pushed taxes to their highest level in history with a £40 billion tax bomb. Now, in the last hour, it has emerged that the pound suffered its biggest fall in 18 months, down 1.2% as the markets react unfavourably to yesterday's budget. Was it a nightmare on Downing Street? Well, joining us now is someone who is a toolmaker and also the son of a toolmaker. No, it's not the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. It's Conrad Pearson from Pearson Precision Toolmakers in Hereford. Welcome to the show, Conrad. Thank you for agreeing to speak to us today on GB News. I saw your story today in a newspaper, and I think you speak for many, many thousands of small business owners across the country. When the impact of the budget dropped on you, it's going to have to make difficult decisions for you. Conrad, tell us about the position you find yourself in today.
What they left us with last night was absolutely atrocious, really. And going forward now, do we invest to try and make our way through it? But can you ever see the economy of manufacturing taking off? Or is it going to slow right down? And then with all the tax hikes and the economy slowing, where do we go from there? I really don't know. It's more money off our bottom line, where we're struggling as it is anyway, as a company. It's not easy out there in this industry. And I just can't see where we go from here, really.
And Conrad, your business, Pearson Precision Toolmakers, is the embodiment of the lifeblood of On Your Bike Small Business Britain. You've been going, your father was a toolmaker, that's your dad Benjamin, your son Samuel, he's the son of a toolmaker. He works for you. I also believe you work with your wife. You're a proper bona fide family-run business, the kind of thing that Britain needs much, much more of.
Yeah, we've grown from a small garage unit to a much bigger unit, and we've just brought the land next door because I was going to put up another building to try and create another arm to our company to help with manufacturing. as well as tool making, do a bit of manufacturing and repairs. And I'm just stood looking at it thinking, well, do I do this or where do I go from here? Because in the future, with like even the inheritance tax and everything like that now, what's it going to cost my kids when I hand it down to my son and my daughter? Is how much are they going to have to pay? Because everything's taxed to the hilt now. And yeah, it's looking forward and like, right, what do I do now? And it's changed in 24 hours what I do actually do. I could see it coming as soon as he got in. You could see they're going to hammer us because we're the ones that, the small businesses and medium-sized businesses are the ones that's going to try and get this country out of it by taxing us even worse. So I just
Con, the budget they said on the eve of the budget, this is a budget to get Britain working. The Labour Party is the party of small business. They kept telling us this ad infinitum, and yet today, Conrad, as I understand it, you may have to make a cruel cut. You may have to lose one of your team members because of the implications. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, basically, we've had a quick shift over what we do and how much our finances and everything, and I think we've got to try and create another £30,000 somewhere, just to stay on an even keel. So this money's got to be created somewhere. We either got to try and do more work or charge more, which a lot of our customers like always say, oh, well, can you cut the price of this? Can you cut the price of that? We've got to try and sort of manage it the best we can and keep our workers working. But other than that, this 30,000's got to come from somewhere that I've got to find over the next 12 months just to stay on an even keel. So I really don't know at the moment.
It's heartbreaking to hear that, you know, so often we say, you know, we don't make anything anymore in Britain. You know, we've destroyed our manufacturing industry. We've outsourced to the third world, increasingly to China. Yeah, when we have a business like yours, that's just like the life and blood of British small business, you're finding yourself getting no favours from Downing Street. As a son of a toolmaker yourself, what would your message be to Sir Keir Starmer, as son of a toolmaker? What would your message? They watched the show. What would you say to the Prime Minister?
Yeah, well, if he is a son of the toolmaker, I know what hours my dad used to do. He was 12 hours a day, every day. I'm the same. My son has to do the same. We create things that get shipped all over the world. We work for mold companies that sell all over the world and all over Europe. So the world is paying us to do our jobs, and we're bringing money into the country. We're not just recycling money round and round, we're bringing it in. And that's what we do for car industries in different countries, in America, in Germany. And we're the lifeblood going to keep this country and pick it up, and we're just getting nothing. Well, it felt terrible last night when I went through it all, and me and my wife sat down there, and I was thinking, well, there you go. We've had 3 massive hikes in minimum wage. Our skilled, so we've got a few on minimum wage in the factory, and our skilled people that we've got here, I've got to raise them now by 6.7%. They're not going to let an unskilled person catch up a skilled person. So all those price hikes have to go through, and then dropping the NI from £9,100 down to £5,000 limit. That's another increase again. It's just nothing was given to us at all. And I know they give the business rates relief to hospitality and stuff. I know they've had a hard time through COVID and everything, but we need help like that. My business rates, we were just under the threshold, and they come and reevaluated me 6 months ago, and now I've got a bill going up to £11,000 for small business rates. And I'm just thinking, well, you know, that's another, because they reevaluated us, that's another amount of money I've got to find. I've got to put it on somewhere, on our hourly rate, on our products that we sell. It's got to be found from somewhere, and then another £30,000 I've got to find as well. So it's just figures for a small company that we only employ 7 people. That is 1.5 person's wages, like sort of thing. It's huge, really is.
Well, Conrad Pearson, thank you so much for joining us. Can we just get that picture once again on the screen, because I think it just shows the true legacy of an intergenerational business. I believe that's your father there in the centre. Is that correct? That's Benjamin.
Yes.
That's yourself there, Con, and that's your lad Samuel, right? So that's the 3 of you. That's Dad and the lads. Keeping Britain building, keeping Britain working away. I wish you the very, very best of luck. I hope that you get some comfort, and I hope you keep going. Thank you so much for joining us. A real-life son of a toolmaker, talking a lot more sense, I think, than perhaps the real son of a toolmaker, Sir Keir Starmer. Conrad Pearson, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Keep up the best of British work. Thank you. And joining us now is the former Labour advisor, James Mathewson. James, welcome to the show. There we have it. This is the impact of the budget at grassroots level. Son of a toolmaker there, Conrad getting annihilated, talking about having to take out loans to keep his business going, fighting against business rates, against national insurance rates, potentially having to lay off staff. This is precisely the kind of business that the Labour Party promised that they would help. And lo and behold, the day after the budget, they feel completely betrayed.
Very difficult situation. And to hear from Conrad then, very upsetting, isn't it? Because small businesses are the backbone of our country. There's no doubt about it. And everything that came from the budget, everything the budget was hoping to do and aiming to do was supposed to be about supporting people like that. So it's always difficult when people are in that situation. And the economy at the moment obviously is not fully recovered or anywhere near where it should be as well. So it doesn't help. However, the budget as a whole and the situation we were facing, even hours before the budget was announced and what we thought some of the cuts would be, or the scale of the cuts, or the kind of scale of the challenge that was laid out from the Rose Garden speech onwards by Keir Starmer. I think we're in a much better place now. We're in a much more positive place post-budget than we were pre-budget, because let's be honest, whether this was intentional on the part of the communication of the party or not, but people were really, really concerned. And of course, there are people who are going to be impacted or not helped out by this and not supported in the way that they feel they should be. But there are so many areas, Martin, to fix. There are so many difficult areas in this country to try and get a hold of. And it is firefighting, trying to put out one after the other. I don't envy Rachel Reeves, but I believe what she's done with what she's got is very impressive.
Well, it's all about choices, isn't it? It's about choosing what to spend the money on. Rachel Reeves made the choice yesterday to whack £25 billion of costs onto small businesses like Conrad Pearson's. And she also made the choice to spend £22 billion on carbon capture, to spend £16 billion on foreign climate aid, to give £11 billion in public sector pay rises to their union chums, to teachers, to nurses, to train drivers who are already on 65 grand a year for doing a 3-day week. James, I know, you can shake your head at that. The fact of the matter is that alone, all of that is double the so-called black hole, which, by the way, the OBR today said wasn't £22 billion. It's more like £9.5 billion of inherited, uncosted spending by Jeremy Hunt. It's about decisions, it's about priorities, and people like Conrad and the farmers we spoke to today saying the decisions that have been made are terrible for Britain.
Terrible for them, of course it is, and that's the challenge. And as you rightly point out, Martin, there are choices to be made. But when I was shaking my head there, I was shaking my head at when you said union chums. I know it's Halloween today, but not everything's a horror story, When it comes down to negotiating on behalf of workforces, that's what trade unions are for. They're a great thing. They're not some evil organisation that's taking money away from the taxpayer. They are helping people and they are fighting for workers' rights. Rachel Reeves had a choice, and the choice was either those businesses shoulder the burden of this black hole that was left for them, or it and employees, and most of us are employees. There are more employees than there are business owners in the country. And of course, it's those with the wider shoulders. When they're saying wider shoulders, they don't mean rich people, everybody who's wealthy. It's just those who can contribute more have to contribute more.
But James, my point is, the burden isn't falling on those with the broadest shoulders. It's falling on farmers that told us today they might lose generations of farmland through punitive inheritance taxes. It's business people like Conrad Pearson, 3 generations of toolmakers. Sir Keir Starmer is proud of being the son of a toolmaker, proud of being his father being a toolmaker. We heard their real-life toolmakers are looking down the barrel of a gun about having to close their businesses because of decisions made by this Labour government that they believe are shafting them.
Well, I don't think we should downplay. I know we like the Toolmaker line. I know it goes down well with certain people, Martin, and you like
it's
to
reality.
say it. But Keir Starmer's dad was a toolmaker, so I don't think it's fair to say real toolmakers because he made tools. So I don't know what the definition of a toolmaker is other than that.
Some say he did make a tool, but that's not the point.
Say, yeah.
This is real life toolmaking business today is what I'm saying. They're saying they're going to the wire because of the budget yesterday. I'm trying to make the point that in the real world, these decisions have a grave impact. I wonder if Downing Street gets that. That's my point.
That's, and you have every right to ask that question. We should hold the government accountable on it because support should be in place for those small businesses. Absolutely no doubt about that. And I hope people from the government are listening to Conrad and people like that in the fallout of this budget. The problem is there are only so many choices the government can make right now. They are in a difficult situation and they do not want to repeat austerity because remember what we saw the last time there was a black hole to plug? We had George Osborne and David Cameron cutting every single public service that has led us down this path to where we are today, where so much needs to be done to repair all of that damage that's been previously done. So, that doesn't get us out of anything. In the meantime, hopefully when those green shoots of growth start to come, there can be more to be dished out. Okay. But in the meantime, if it's between employees or employers, you have to take employers.
OK, we have to leave it there. James Mathewson, thank you for joining us on the show. Thank you, as ever, for being a great sport on this Halloween. Now, still to come, we'll be crossing to Valencia as the death toll from the horrific flooding just keeps on rising. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have, security, Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting and worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons, obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a 71-year-old British man is amongst those confirmed now to have been killed in deadly flash floods that have hit large parts of Spain, as the death toll has now risen to at least 158. Let's go live now to Valencia and speak to GB News reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, welcome to the show. The death toll is rising, and are we expecting more rain to come? Tell us the latest.
I think we are indeed expecting more rain, Martin. Now, you've seen today we've spent most of our day on the outskirts of Valencia, taking in the destruction. We've now moved into the city centre to try and speak to some Brits and, before I'm told off, one Irishman, otherwise I'll be in trouble, to try and find out how these flash floods have affected British people here in Valencia. So I think we can speak to them now. Welcome to the programme, guys. We'll come to yourself first, James. This is the Irishman. I don't want to get in trouble. Talk to me about the day that the flash flooding began. What was it like here in the city centre?
Yeah, it was a bit weird. I mean, I feel like a lot of people were kind of scared. So like, there was a bit of a weird atmosphere, kind of like, and we didn't know if we should close or not. But yeah, then there was mostly like English, Irish, and Dutch people. They came, like, they just thought it was just a bit of rain, and so they came for a pint. So like, it was fairly busy. We ended up closing early because obviously, like, it was a bit dangerous. So, but yeah.
Obviously, over the past few days, we've kind of seen the devastation. How does it feel kind of being in the city centre, almost removed from it, when you can see what's happening out in the outskirts of Valencia, especially as a Brit?
I think like the towns, whenever you see what's going on, the flooding and everything, it's just so extreme. Versus here, it just feels like a bit of light rain. You don't really feel hit by it. And just watching all the devastations, honestly, heartbreaking. We were here and just working, so it's a totally different environment. Feels like you're not really living in it, and just watching other people go through, that's devastating, definitely.
David, I'm going to come to you now, because I know you're a Scot, aren't you? And you've literally just arrived. You're having your first pint of the night.
I just came from Alicante Airport,
so
just there.
And how was that journey? I know that it's not been a particularly easy journey for you.
It was horrible, like just so many cars just up against the road. It took so long to get into the actual city. It took like 2 hours to get into the main city because there's so much destruction outside. And then when you come in, it's not like anything.
It's like a different world, isn't it? That's what we were saying earlier. I'm just going to come back to yourself quickly, James, because we were speaking earlier about your mum on the day, and she was trapped, wasn't she? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so she works for Smurfit Westrock. It's an Irish packaging company, and they have a factory here. So she was there, and the flood, there was 1.5 meters of water. It covered the whole reception area, so all the workers were stuck in the kind of offices that were kind of slightly up. They were there all night, no power, no nothing. It was.
Just to clarify, your mum is safe now, though, isn't she?
Yeah, so yeah, she's good now. Yeah, but it was definitely a traumatic event. Like, we're definitely worried. Like.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, guys. I hope you have a brilliant Halloween. Thank you very much. A very different story here in the city centre of Valencia compared to the destruction that we've been seeing on the outskirts today, Martin.
Thank you, Sophie Reaper, for that update from Valencia. Thank you very much. Now, in the last couple of hours, it has emerged that the pound has suffered its biggest fall in 18 months, down 1.2% now, as the markets react unfavourably, it seems, to yesterday's budget. And joining me now to try and make sense of that is the economics expert and great friend of the show, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Justin, welcome to the show. So 1.2%, how concerned should we be, and what do you think is driving that?
Well, it's a lack of confidence. What you need in a budget is not just people who understand the finances and how it all work, and you trust what you're being told. And, well, we've got a problem now already with this 20 billion black hole or not. We're not quite sure. And then, of course, actually then laying out figures which are credible, but also give people confidence that actually the economy is going to grow. And yes, there are global difficulties, there are national difficulties, but it's going to get better. In fact, actually, what's happened is you've actually had a budget here which hasn't really enthused anybody at all. And hasn't really focused on the areas of growth that we've got. It made it sound as though we were a basket case. We're very good at small businesses. We set up more than France and Germany put together. We're actually very good at technology hubs all over the country. And so there's a lot we can do to be helping those companies be more successful, not by giving them money, but by giving them tax breaks for the future and giving people confidence that actually things do get better. We've had 100 days of dismal doom telling us it's going to be a bad time. Well, I'm afraid, remember, our economy is based on the service sector. That's you and me going out for supper. Well, not personally, you know what I mean. Individuals going out buying stuff. The largest employer are smaller companies. Focus on the growth areas and give people confidence that things are heading in the right direction. Instead, what we had was an economist's a lecture on depression and how awful it's going to be. And by the way, it's not my fault. That's no way to run a country.
Well, I'll be doing my bit to support the hospitality sector later on, but I mean, I'll have to buy about 700 pints around here before I get one for free. But Justin, on a more serious point, is there any evidence of people selling off on the stock market? Because, of course, capital gains tax will be hammering people, cashing in their shares. Might things like that affect the confidence on the FTSE 100, for example?
Well, we've already seen it over the past few weeks. As soon as some fairly solid hints that capital gains tax was going to get hit, a lot of investors did do precisely that, to actually make sure that they were going to pay tax to be a lower level and not wait till later. But also you can see it with what's happened with the pounds, you were saying, a dramatic fall indeed, and also what you're seeing in the gilt market. And what that's telling you is actually people aren't going to buy British debt unless they're going to get greater rewards, which is why you see the cost going up. That's a clear measurement of the market actually not liking what they've heard. So what the government's now going to do is come back and say, really, actually things are going to get better. Trust us what we're doing. Give us the confidence, and you'll see that reflected in the markets. At the moment, whether it comes to the stock market, comes to the bond market, neither at the moment are looking pretty enthusiastic about this at all.
Thank you for helping us to make sense of that, Justin Stewart, as ever, resplendent in those red braces. Thank you very much. There's loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including our political editor, Chris Hope, as Chris Chopper has sat down with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. How did his Halloween head-to-head go? He'll be here to tell us about it soon, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Good evening, it's 5:32. The latest headlines from the GBNews Centre. The Spanish government has confirmed the death toll from the devastating floods in the country has now risen to 158. Rescue efforts are continuing as authorities deal with the worst flooding in the country in decades. Dozens of people are still missing after the huge floods swept the eastern province of Valencia and beyond. A 71-year-old British man is among those killed. Torrential rain inundated towns, dragging cars, downing bridges and leaving some people trapped in floodwaters. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has declared 3 days of national mourning as the extreme conditions continue, restricting some of those rescue efforts. Well, hundreds of soldiers have now also been sent to Valencia to help in the rescue and recovery operations. The Prime Minister, his Chancellor and other members of the Cabinet have spent the day defending the biggest tax hike in a generation. Yesterday's budget paved the way for £40 billion a year in extra taxes. On a visit to an NHS trust in the Midlands, Sir Keir Starmer said the rise was the responsible thing to do to deal with the fiscal black hole and provide more money for public services.
We've had to do what is responsible to fix the foundations and rebuild our country. As I think is now well understood, we inherited a £22 billion black hole, money that wasn't accounted for by the last government. I'm not prepared to simply walk past that. We have to fix it. So we've done the responsible thing. The principles that we've put in place are to stabilise our economy and to invest in the future along with reform.
Well, the Conservative leadership candidate, Robert Jenrick, has accused Labour of lying to the public in the run-up to the election. Mr Jenrick claims Rachel Reeves' budget will mean misery for millions and said the tax hike amounts to the complete opposite of what Labour said during the election campaign. Lawyers acting for alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed have said they've now been contacted by 400 people. Speaking at a news conference, Dean Armstrong KC said those who've contacted the Justice for Harrods Survivors group are not just from Harrods, but from Fulham FC and various places associated with Al-Fayed. A string of allegations have been made against the former Harrods owner following the release of a documentary about the businessman who died last year. Detectives investigating the theft of more than 22 tonnes of cheese have arrested a 63-year-old man. Scotland Yard detectives spent the last 10 days on the trail of the suspect after the theft from Neil's Yard Dairy, an artisan cheese supplier in South London. The theft traumatised the cheese-loving world, with even the celebrity chef Jamie Oliver urging his followers on social media to be alert for lorry loads of posh cheese being sold on the cheap. OK, you're right up to date with the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Some areas have been lucky to see sunshine today. Many others have been cloudy and it stays that way through the rest of the day. Mild though. However, it is increasingly wet and windy in the far north. Tightly packed isobars around the top of this area of higher pressure and weather fronts sinking south. So some heavier rain for a time, especially during the evening for Shetland. That rain pushing into Orkney and northwest Scotland overnight. A lot of low cloud here. Further south, we do have some cloud breaks for northeast England, more especially southern parts of England and South Wales. Some of those cloud breaks will continue overnight, and where we do see those cloud breaks, temperatures dipping into the mid-single figures, and there'll be a few mist patches around first thing Friday. Otherwise, a lot of cloud cover where we keep the cloud 10 or 11 degrees first thing. But a fairly gloomy start once again, whether you've got the cloud or those mist and fog patches. Certainly some cloud covering the hills of Wales and northern England, some drizzle here. More extensive drizzle coming into Northern Ireland and western and northern Scotland first thing Friday, but clearing from the far north. The wind's easing, but at the same time changing direction to bring colder air in to Shetland, Orkney, and then the far north of the mainland of Scotland. So starting the day chilly here compared with recent mornings. And it's going to be a colder than average day in the far north. But elsewhere, we keep generally cloudy skies and mild weather. The rain fizzling out as it pushes into the central belt and the southeast of Scotland by the afternoon. And temperatures broadly 13 to 15 Celsius, except for the far north of Scotland, where it will be 6 to 8 degrees. Brighter skies, though, through Friday for the north of Scotland as this feature moves south across central and southeastern parts. That tends to fizzle out into the weekend as higher pressure builds once again. However, that does mean that many areas will remain largely cloudy.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Dumfries and Galloway. The A74M is down to a single lane northbound. Everyone's been funneled into the inside lane on that 3-lane stretch, heading north for junction 17, just north of Lockerbie, where a lorry has struck the bridge. On the M62 in Cheshire, 2 lanes are blocked off eastbound from junction 11 to 12 towards the M60 towards Manchester, where a lorry's broken down. Queues back onto the M60. In Staffordshire, Stapenhill Road at Burton on Trent. This is the A444, of course. That's closed off Bridge Street at the scene of a crash. And on the M40 in Buckinghamshire, the motorway is partly blocked northbound just after junction 4, the High Wycombe turn off Handy Cross, where a lorry's on fire. That's causing long queues back onto the A404 towards Marlow. And Woodford Avenue blocked southbound at Redbridge in East London by an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, you may remember a few weeks ago, Mada Pasa, the brazen immigrant who posted a number of clips on social media boasting about coming to the UK and even appearing to threaten Nigel Farage. Well, it now appears he's arrived in the UK. Take a look at this video.
Hey, la UK after me folket. Kola fem butter after me folket. Dombeta moda pasa Kola dar. The fem butter will toma da pasa.
Now, for those who were listening on radio, Mada Pasa there filmed himself along with other immigrants, apparently crossing the English Channel in a packed dinghy. Now, that's a very familiar sight, depressingly so, in fact. Now, the Home Office have been contacted for a comment, and make sure that you tune into Nigel Farage's show tonight at 7 p.m. That video sent exclusively to us here at GB News. Nigel Farage will have his response to that later on, 7 till 8 p.m. Make sure you don't miss it. Now, moving on, Rachel Reeves has been defending her budget in an interview with GB News' political editor Christopher Hope, who joins me now in the studio. Chris, you sat down with the Chancellor. How did your Halloween head-to-head go?
In the Treasury courtyard, Martin, just back. I charged back here to make sure I could be on your show talking about it. She gave some reassurance, I think, about future tax rises, because there is a fear that she'll do it again in a few years' time. But she made clear this is a one-off big tax-raising budget for this Parliament. We'll hold to that at GB News, but here's what she had to say.
This is a one-off budget. It is to wipe the slate clean and fix the foundations after the black hole we were left by the Conservatives. But we're not going to need to come back in another budget and do anything like this again. We have now taken the action to get our public finances on a stable path. And, Chris, we've set the spending envelope for the rest of this Parliament, so we don't need to come back for more. And, indeed, we've moved to annual budgets rather than having them twice a year. So families and business can have confidence. We're not going to come back and ask for more money in the spring like the Conservatives kept doing. We have now set the budgets for public spending for this Parliament.
Rachel Reeves talking to us a moment ago. Now, she did also say that her national insurance employers hike, Martin, may mean slightly lower wage growth. Yeah, so admitting that, I don't remember that being in a manifesto, but we'll move on. She also talked about she also was clear about not ruling out wanting to be Prime Minister. I asked her a bit cheekily, you want the bigger job, the big one? She's now, I'm happy being Chancellor, not saying no, which is interesting because I think many people do think she's a future successor to Sir Keir Starmer, who's going to be near pension age at the next election. Also asked the important question that many viewers were concerned about, why on earth we have to wait until now, over 24 hours to hear from her. She said she cares about our viewers, and she did say she's done lots of interviews with me and the channel before as Chancellor, and looks forward to many more. So she does care, despite the feeling that she didn't care earlier, Martin.
There haven't been many positive headlines anywhere. Even The Guardian have been caustic, the BBC have been caustic, the supportive media. Is it affecting her? I always ask you when you're up close and personal, did she seem shaken by what's happened, the reaction to it?
OK, so it's 5:30, it's the Treasury, we're outside. She's done other interviews with other broadcasters. Now we're towards the end of that queue. Yeah. She looked a bit tired. I mean, she mixed up income tax and national insurance. She said income tax on employers, and I had to correct her. Now, I'll forgive her that because it's a long day and she's Chancellor, but I think she looked a bit weary, and I think it's not going to get any easier. Unlike previous Chancellors, they do their media interviews going into the big day, a few on the big day, then they let Parliament debate it, as is happening now in Parliament. Instead, Rachel Reeves is doing interviews this weekend on Sunday, and I think day 5 after a dramatic budget like this might be getting even more uncomfortable for her, so she may regret that decision. But it's good for us to get the question to her.
Well done on getting that sit-down with Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, today in 11 Downing Street. 5 days is a lot of time for journalists to pick through the detail and look for all the attack lines. So it could be a bruising weekend for her.
I mean, some are saying already that they may have to row back or increase the £1 million threshold on small farms. She was quite clear that, she was clear why it's a good idea, saying that you can claim that back over 10 years, that above the £1 million cost of that's let in your inheritance, you can actually defray it off with a different treatment of that tax. So the areas which look wobbly at the moment, she's doubling down on.
the farmers thing has gone down really, really bad.
Yes.
It's gone down like a cow pat on a breakfast table with farmers. I spoke to a farmer earlier on who was literally saying they were having to look at splitting up farms that have been there for generations.
It's because it's
simply can't afford those inheritance tax bills. The myth that this is like only giant multicultural farmers, multinational farmers. This is small holdings, and people are really, really suffering. We had a real life son of a toolmaker on the show. You may have seen it, Conrad Pearson, saying that the son of a toolmaker in Downing Street has no clue about what small business holders are going through. Was withering in his response to it.
I had 7 minutes with her, so I can't ask every single question we wanted to ask. But on the issue of farmers, she did say that 73% of farms last year wouldn't have paid an inheritance tax. Of course, a lot of farms, the buildings alone will be £1 million quid, let alone all the land around them. So you might well see, and viewers and listeners have been piling in with questions saying, how is this a commitment to dealing with net zero food miles if you're going to break up these small farms?
Excellent stuff as ever, and you've sat down with the Chancellor today, Chris Hope. Fantastic stuff. And you can watch the full interview with Chris Hope with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, at 6 p.m. this evening, right after this show on Jubes & Co. Make sure you don't miss out. Another great work there. Well done, Chris Hope. Now, it's Halloween, but why are the graveyards so noisy? Because of all the coughing. Who writes this rubbish? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Young adults spend a few years living away from home at university, those who go to university, but many then have no choice but to move back in with their parents because of the rising cost of renting.
But is this an excuse, and are Gen Z or Z just being lazy?
No, I mean, what do you make of it, Debbie? Because we do have to have some sympathy, don't we, in that, you know, rents are very high, it's very hard to get a mortgage, there are issues there.
I think the push towards young people to go to university as well is not necessarily the right thing for a lot of people, and I think people should start work early. These guys leave their universities with a huge amount of debt, no jobs, or huge rent. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So I think we've got to look at the work ethic and start it younger. Because I think it's so easy just to move back with your mum and dad, isn't it?
To speak like a Gen Zer, they would say that, well, it's OK for your generation, you had it easy.
Realistically, that isn't quite that true, because a lot of people then didn't go to university. This is a relatively new thing that everybody goes to university.
I have to say, what strikes me today is that you still have, amongst all these problems, not having enough money, going to university when perhaps you shouldn't be, all these sort of issues, you still get all these people saying, well, I'm going to have a year out.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think the thing is, they say, oh, it was easy for you, but it wasn't really. We still had to rent places.
But the thing is with this debate, Debbie, is the generation we're talking about, Gen Z, who we're accusing of being lazy, have been raised by our generation.
Yeah.
So what have we done wrong that, if they are lazier, has made them like that?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Welcome back. It's 5:49. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, here's one for you. It's October the 31st, which means only one thing. Happy Halloween. But of course, killjoy dentists and sourpussers at the Royal College of Surgeons have suggested that we should give kids stickers, not sweets, for trick-or-treat this year to avoid tooth decay. Now, does this idea have any teeth, or is nothing safe from the fun vampires? Well, join me now down the line to discuss this suggestion by dentist is Toothless in England founder Mark Jones. Mark, huge fan of your work, but surely we're allowed a day off. Halloween is a day when kids enjoy sweets. They don't want stickers. In fact, Mark, on the way to the studio today, I told my daughter, who's 10, about this. She was busily carving her pumpkin, and she thought it was a true story. Yes, I let her believe it was true for a minute. Her lip started to wobble. She was very, very upset at the idea that kids might get stickers and not sweets on this trick or treat day. But does the idea have any teeth?
Wow. Great to be with you again, Martin. Thanks for having us back on Halloween. What a time to be alive, or dead, depending on where you stand with the celebration. But I dare say, Martin, your young girl, your daughter, isn't or wasn't amongst the, well, over 19,000 children aged between 5 and 9 that were admitted into hospital this year up until April. That's just up to April, those figures. Admitted into hospital for tooth decay, severe tooth decay. It's you know, I can understand why those great people at the Royal Society of Surgeons have put this out, because we know that sugar in our diet, particularly processed sugar, is something that we need to sort of reduce and be aware of the facts, the effects rather on our teeth if we don't brush them properly and regularly.
But Mark, all this really is down to bad parenting, isn't it? I mean, the trick with kids, pardon the pun, if you give them a treat, you make them aware of the fact that they need to take care of their choppers. In fact, when I had that chat with my daughter earlier on, I said, look, you're allowed sweets tonight, but of course, you've got to take care of your teeth. My son is going to the orthodontist to have his braces adjusted. I said to him, look, you've got to be really careful because they get stuck under your braces. Responsible parents are allowed to give their kids sweets so long as they give them the education. Is this epidemic of rotten teeth just down to bad parenting?
Well, I think, as I've said on your show before, that it's not really bad parenting. I think we need to educate parents. And if those same parents that I speak to on a quite frequent basis, Martin, that tell me, look, I never had, growing up, the education at school or the education from my dentist. I just didn't see a dentist because there weren't any that were able to see me on the NHS. And this cuts to the core of the problem. Children are growing up through school, believe it or not, going into secondary education, having never seen a dentist, never had that explained to them, how good oral health cleaning regimes can promote better outcomes for later on in life. So I have some sympathy with the argument, but we need to be out there putting education at the fore and being able to treat those that are in most need. And currently, those are children and adults equally. And we need to get our NHS back into a shape where it provides oral health care, treatment and education for the citizens of this country.
Great, so we have to leave it there. Seem to be ran out of time, but hopefully Fang's going to get better. Thank you very much, Toothless in England founder Mark Jones. Always a pleasure. Now, I've got a quick minute to go through some of your says. We've had hundreds of emails, in particularly about farmland. Is it being snatched away, turned into wind farms, into housing estates, solar farms? Mark says this: reforms in the budgets of that Bill Gates visited Downing Street recently to speak to Sir Keir Starmer. Gates has bought up thousands and thousands of acres of farmland in America. It's no secret he wants to stop farming for the environmental scam and feed the world with his manufactured food. Is a similar thing happening here? We don't know the answer. Andy says this, the simple reality is that Labour has no clue about farming. Labour is failing on so many levels of governance because they are activists. Okay, quickly moving on. Don't forget, up next is Jubes and Go. Got a fantastic exclusive from the Southport, and at 7, Nigel Farage, the Madder Passer video. You'll make sure you tune in to that. I'll be back 3 till 6 p.m. tomorrow, but now here's your Halloween weather with Aidan McGibbon. Trick or treat.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Next 24 hours bring more of the same sort of weather for many of us. Overcast, rain and wind in the far north, but some brighter spells at times elsewhere. There have been some brighter spells through the day. They're tending to remain in places overnight, but for the vast majority it stays cloudy and it's wet and windy in the far north of Scotland. Some heavy rain moving into the mainland of northern Scotland as well as Orkney, the Outer Hebrides overnight, accompanied by a strong wind. That rain also reaching parts of northwest England and Northern Ireland, some drizzly stuff over the hills. Further south and further east, some cloud breaks, and where we do have some cloud breaks first thing, there'll be a few mist patches and temperatures in the single figures. And it will be a colder start for the far north of Scotland as the rain and wind clear through. The wind changes direction, so 5 Celsius there for Shetland. But otherwise, it's double figures for much of Scotland with the strong wind continuing. A lot of low cloud for western Scotland, some cloud breaks in eastern Scotland, but rain tending to move south. Northern Ireland, Northern England, low cloud, some drizzle about. But for southern parts, we start the day with either cloudy skies or some fog patches first thing. Any fog tending to clear. And then once again, those areas that saw some sunshine on Thursday are well placed to see sunny spells again on Friday. So the south and southwest, as well as the northeast. But we've got this area of cloud and rain sinking south across central Scotland. Brighter skies to the north of it, but feeling colder, 6 to 8 Celsius for the Northern Isles. Then into Saturday, any brighter but colder weather in the far north tends to disappear once again as higher pressure builds in, pushing the weather front northeastwards and bringing milder but cloudier weather across the whole of the country. So the weekend offers more of the same. A lot of cloud, 1 or 2 brighter spells from time to time, relatively mild for the time of year.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long delays in Cheshire on the M62. 2 lanes on that 4-lane stretch blocked off eastbound from junction 11 to 12 towards the M60 towards Eccles, where a lorry has broken down. And on the M42 in the West Midlands, a lorry's broken down in the roadworks on the southbound carriageway, blocking off a lane from junction 6 to 5 from the Birmingham Airport turn-off down to the A41 Solihull bypass, Quaysbanks junction 7 Coles Hill. Norfolk, southwest of Norwich, the A11 is closed northbound on the Heverset bypass from Wyndham up to the A47. They're recovering a tanker that overturned in the early hours this morning. The M40 in Buckinghamshire, partly blocked northbound just after junction 4, the High Wycombe Hanny Cross exit, where a lorry's on fire. Long queues back onto the A404. And the M25 in